This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
I don't hear too many bullish cases for China in 2025.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump took steps on everything from TikTok to the southern border.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. We say good morning to you. Busy economic day, next 48 hours into the PCE report. We'll get to that in a moment. We're coming up. Dan Ives will join us here on technology, and then Mandeep Singh back-to-back. A lot of brain power there as well. Paul, I got to do economics before we talk tech and Nvidia and Apple. Ford, I'm looking at the Sweeney yield this morning. I got down to a 4.06.
How about that?
On the two-year yield.
I know. So it's just extraordinary. We got yields coming in here. Tom, a little bit of a lift here, but you know, you got the 2-year 4.1%, the 10-year at 4.3%. We were down at 4.26% earlier. So yields coming in here. So
it's price up, yield down, and basically flows off the GDP report at 8:30 here. Maybe that'll give us an indicator for it. Still solid economic growth, but you see the angst out there. Given whatever your politics, whatever's going on in Washington is redounding back. Again, we will have today the press conference of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the President of the United States. Look for that on Bloomberg Radio. I'm going to call it afternoon time, as I say. 11 a.m., a conversation with the leader of Amazon?
I think so. We're going to carry that on Bloomberg Radio and TV as well. So.
We'll see that as well.
Caroline
right now, the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got NASDAQ futures leading the charge this morning. This is after Nvidia's results drew mixed response. Investors are just used to getting these blowout results. Nvidia shares, they're up about 1%. We go to future. NASDAQ futures up 0.7%, 158 points. Dow futures up 0.3%, 151 points. S&P futures up 0.6% or 40 points. Like we said, the 2-year yield 4.10%, up 3 basis points, and the yield on the 10-year 4.30%, and that's up 4 basis points. To currencies, the yen actually the biggest decliner against the dollar. Japanese yen is at 149.78 against the dollar. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. To earnings we go. I was waiting for Warner Brothers Discovery. We are still waiting for it right now. Stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, I have to point out this. Gains in streaming just couldn't offset declines in traditional TV for Paramount Global. Shares down nearly 2%. It reported fourth quarter sales and profit that fell short. Paul, I guess your landman was just not enough. Not enough for it. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
I saw time spent listening, and Landman's right up there. It's
awesome.
ginormous.
Great show. I know
Mrs.
all about
Keene's watching.
Yeah, it's good. Billy Bob Thornton, the best cursor in all of Hollywood, I think.
Oh, I thought Dan Ives was.
No. Billy Bob Thornton.
Billy Bob's got it over Dan Ives. We'll see. Joining us now, after extensive travel, thrilled he could find time to start us off this morning.
He was in
Daniel
Singapore
Ives.
yesterday.
He was in Singapore?
How do you get back to
the Gulfstream? You know, he's got the Wedbush Gulfstream, global head of technology for Wedbush. Dan Ives, I want to look forward. What did you learn from Nvidia yesterday that's part of the AI story of the other 10 stocks?
I mean, it's all about Blackwell that's fueling. I mean, 11 billion. That shows, I mean, this is going to be on a trajectory of 15, 20 billion a quarter. So if you had any concerns, it's the opposite. Big tech, other enterprises, they're doubling down. That's the multiplier effect across tech. For every dollar spent on a NVIDIA chip, $8, $10 spent across the rest of tech.
What is your x-axis? When you look at technology development, we'll talk to Mandeep Singh about this in a moment. Dan Ives, do you have a timeline out on NVIDIA? Do you have a terminal value on NVIDIA that's appropriate? 7 years? What is it?
I think 2 to 225 to me is ultimately going to be sort of the base case as this plays out. And again, you're not going to need like the massive blowouts. They stay on this trajectory. Outside of some black swan, and the Bears will always hope for that like they have the last decade, I think this is a $4 and ultimately a $5 trillion market cap as it plays out. Wow. There is one red phone in the world for these chips, and he's wearing a black leather jacket. His name's Jensen.
Dan, talk to us about just catalysts for this name. It's really unusual for NVIDIA shareholders to look down at their Bloomberg screen and see year-to-date stocks down a couple of percent here, not to see a green on the screen here. What's the next catalyst, do you think, for this stock?
Yeah, look, I think Catalyst now, clearly going forward, you're going to continue to focus on what Blackwell demand looks like, right? And Nvidia, they'll have their conference in March. I think that's going to be a sort of spectacle. That's going to be another launching pad for Jensen, for Nvidia. And look, and I think there was all smoke, no fire. And I just continue, and we've talked about it on the show. DeepSeek is bullish for Nvidia and big tech. It's not the opposite, despite many of the bears yelling fire in a crowd theater.
If you're just joining us, folks, Mandeep Singh will be with us in a moment from Bloomberg Intelligence. We start with Daniel Ives of Wedbush, their head of technology. For those of you on Bloomberg Radio, it is critical to point out Ives with the Penn State Nittany Lions merch in the background.
Yes, exactly.
This morning. At Penn State, Dan Ives, they're going to have to do a rebuy of Apple technology. We had Mark Gurman in 4, 5, 6 days ago, and we started with a chip. And, it was like Mandeep Singh talk. And Dan Ives, Gurman was riveting about the technological veracity of the Apple story. Do you agree?
Oh, I think the best is yet to come. Because and Gurman's talked about it as well, but the consumer AI revolution comes through Cupertino. They're a toll collector. China app, US app, Australian app, it doesn't matter. In other words, it's about that install base. I continue to think that is going to incrementally add $60 to $70 per share, the AI story, the incremental services. And that doesn't include new form factor chip and just more and more control of their ecosystem.
Dan, how did the company kind of position the DeepSeek issue as a competitor out there in the marketplace?
I think actually similar to the rest of big tech. It's a positive. The models, the more innovative the models get, the cheaper they get, the more use case, the more GPU capacity. In other words, that's why that, because everyone here, and you guys talk about it all the time, everyone's waiting for where's the cracks in the armor, smoke, is this the AI bubble? But we've talked about this $2 trillion in CapEx next 3 years. Big tech spend $330 billion this year. You could find cracks, but you're not going to find it here. And I think that's what you saw last night, in terms of really the demand. There was I thought Jensen was actually more bullish than even what he was a few months ago.
Daniel Ives, thank you so much. Get some sleep. Too early. He's traveling worldwide. Dan Ives with us with Wedbush. Well-rested Mandeep Singh joins us right now, senior technology analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. The distinction here, Mandeep, is Ives is doing buy, hold, sell, trying to make money. You're looking at the industry holistically. If I'm Satya Nadella and I'm listening to Nvidia yesterday, what did Microsoft learn from the Nvidia conference call?
Yeah, look, I think Dan mentioned about Blackwell ramping up nicely, contributed $11 billion in the quarter. So that means Nvidia is really ramping up nicely with its new architecture. In fact, they laid out the plan for Blackwell Ultra. So they're moving very fast when it comes to the advances with the chips. The one, I would say, data point that didn't do very well was on the networking side. So they had a second sequential decline in networking revenue. And if I try to tie that in, with the size of clusters, again, in AI, there are these two main concepts, training versus inferencing. Training is driven by the size of clusters. And then if you have a bigger cluster, you have to network it in a way where it's coherent and you can use it for your training purposes. So the fact that NVIDIA's networking revenue declined sequentially, again, it's off a very strong base. It tells you that there may be a slight pause when it comes to building these bigger clusters, and NVIDIA is the most exposed to that trend. So from that perspective, I think you could ask yourself, given their valuation, clearly a lot is baked in terms of growth. And the out years is what everyone is worried about. Can NVIDIA sustain this momentum in the out years, 2027, 28, and beyond? And I don't think we got an answer last night in terms of how this could drive it. And the other data point I would call is the China sales. It's half of where it was before the export controls. And their guide doesn't bake in the fact that if tariffs go into effect, then it would be a much bigger hit on the gross margin, which actually fell 300 basis points.
So following up on that, Mandeep, how did Jensen Huang kind of characterize the whole tariff environment, the trade environment between China and the West?
Yeah, he didn't explain much, neither did the CFO, in terms of what could go wrong. I mean, as of now, what they said was China sales is half of before the export controls went into effect under Biden. And look, if they tighten the export controls, which is a very likely scenario given what we have heard from the administration, then China sales could go to zero by the end of the year. And when you think about upside, I mean, given Nvidia has set this trend of beat and raises, which they did last night as well, you have to ask yourself, where will that upside come from if China sales, which was as big as 20% of the overall sales at one point, now it's much smaller, around 10%. Will that have an impact in terms of the beat and raise trend?
Joining us on your commute across the nation, Mandeep Singh with us with Bloomberg Intelligence on your technology holdings. Good morning on Apple CarPlay. Good morning, SiriusXM. Help me, channel 121.
121.
Nailed
there you
it.
Go. Boom.
Okay. Good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, 92.9 FM in Boston, and here, our flagship, Bloomberg 1130 in New York. On YouTube, Ashley Carmen.
Wow.
On YouTube, billions.
I saw that.
There's a Carl Sagan article.
Yeah.
Billions and billions of downloads. Thank you, Ashley Carmen, for that great summation of YouTube podcasts. That's where we are. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts at YouTube. Mandeep, I look at the technology game now, and if I look at all of the financials, the thing the Gloom Crews got wrong has been margin stability, margin resilience, and dare I say, even margin expansion. Pre-pandemic, Apple's popping 35% EBITDA. Excuse me, that's Nvidia. It's on the wrong screen here. I don't manage the computer like Paul does. Okay, pre-pandemic, Mandeep, Apple's modeling 29, 30% EBITDA. They popped 400, even 500 basis points on that improving margin. Do you guys model out continuing margin resilience on all these technology names?
Well, so what the DeepSeek did was really give people comfort around the fact that AI and LLMs won't be a big drag on some of the software companies that are out there, because you have to think in terms of the infrastructure stack. Previously, you were just renting the compute from the cloud. Now you are paying the model providers for their model, and so if you're a software company, you have to factor that in your COGS. And, if the inferencing costs are coming down, which is what the DeepSeek development showed, and everyone is pivoting towards reasoning models, then the software guys are the most exposed. And I feel right now we are at a point where everyone feels the cost will keep coming down. And that's where the margin impact will be less than initially feared.
So, Mandeep, what do you think the market's modeling out for kind of, revenue growth for an Nvidia on a 2, 3, 4 year basis? Because we've had this huge surge in sales over the past couple of years. What's more of a run rate going forward, do you think?
Yeah, so Nvidia will do $200 billion in revenue most likely this year. So the hyper growth phase at least will continue through this year. Next year, consensus is more like 20%, for a couple of years. And that's where, when you model it in the out years, given the kind of data center build out we have seen in the past 12 months, and we will see in the next 12 months, I mean, that kind of rate is hard to sustain unless, as Jensen said, we will not see a pause until we get to $1 trillion in data center spend.
Right.
If that were to be true, then yes, they can sustain these 20% plus growth rates. But if there is a pause or a digestion period, then that rate could come down considerably.
Mandeep, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you waiting. Get Dan Ives in there off his travels as well. Mr. Singh is with, of course, Bloomberg Intelligence. Really, that's what the show's all about, folks. That's why we suggest you subscribe at YouTube. You can watch at home. You can watch in your office. Some people watch in their car. Am I allowed to say that on air?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not doing it.
The surveillance police will be going after me.
Exactly. I mean, Tom, you look at Nvidia just from a multiple perspective. The PE on calendar 24, like 45 times earnings. calendar year 25, it's like 29 times earnings.
Yeah.
I mean, the earnings are ramping up so aggressively. A lot. That's what the bulls kind of hang their hat on. They're saying, hey, this is a company that earns its way into its multiple. I don't know.
The way that I do it, and I flunked 3 exams, I think, doing this, is if I'm buying a given stock today, how far out do I have to buy it where it's a rational purchase?
Right. Yep.
Am I buying 2 years out? Paul,
yeah.
3 years?
I don't know. I mean,
it's not rational until 36 months out.
You can buy a packaged goods company for 30 times earnings, as you point out all the time. So now I'm getting 30 times earnings for a tech company.
Yeah, it's where we are, folks. We'll just continue to talk to the smartest people we can. Futures up 40 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. Legendary actor Gene Hackman is dead at age 95. Hackman moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1991. The Santa Fe County Sheriff also confirmed Hackman's wife and their dog were also found dead in their home. Hackman starred in numerous films, including Superman in 1978 with Ned Beatty as the villain of villains.
Lex Luthor, the greatest criminal mind of our time. Of our time? I hereby serve notice. He's serving notice to you. That these walls here. Will you shut up, please?
Oh, Mr. Hackman. He also starred in The French Connection and The Poseidon Adventure. Authorities say no foul play is suspected. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the U.S. wants to dilute Russia's close relationship with China without causing division between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. Rubio, speaking to Breitbart, warned that if Russia becomes too dependent on China, it could close a problem for the U.S. Elon Musk was at President Trump's cabinet meeting, the first of Trump's new administration. The president praised Musk and his work at Doge, and Musk thanked the cabinet secretaries for their support. The president also said any federal workers who do not email Doge with an update on their responsibilities are at risk of being fired.
We want to make sure that the people are working, so letters were sent out, and I think everyone at this table is very much behind it, and if they aren't, I'd want them to speak up, but they're very much behind it. Letters were sent out to people just to find out if the people exist.
Meanwhile, thousands of USAID workers who have been fired or placed on leave as part of the Trump administration's dismantling of the agency are being given a brief window today and tomorrow to clear out their workspaces. President Trump announcing that he and Ukraine's President Zelensky will meet face-to-face in Washington tomorrow to sign what he called a very big agreement. The outline of the agreement establishing a reconstruction investment fund, which would call for Ukraine to share its mineral wealth as a payback for past U.S. aid. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Okay, it's the TD Cowen second annual Glowing Ahead Beauty and Wellness Summit. This is Oliver Chen and Jonah Kim over at TD Cowen. Oliver we know well from luxury and all that. I mean, Lisa, I'm shocked you weren't participating in your great panel
When was
stuff.
this?
It's TD Cowen's CEO Beauty Summit, building a platform of beauty disruptors.
Disruptors.
How is the Offspring's bathroom? I'm up to 84 things.
Yes, we have the whole skincare routine because it's all about that. You know, even for kids.
Alex Steele says you have to invest in your face.
You do, but this is like
Michael
young
Barr
kids.
obviously did not get that memo back. Let's be honest.
But it's very true. It is an investment. But
Yep, it's an
it's
investment
just
in your
a lot
face.
of the younger
Okay.
kids are doing it.
This
so
is
much
so
younger.
Oliver Chen.
Yeah.
This is Milk, which is Walden Cast. It's some physician touchy-feely thing.
Oh.
It's like Jelly Tints last year's launch. Ready? Quote, Milk has recently announced that Milk is launching at Ulta in 600 doors.
Oh, great.
TD Cowen Beauty Talk it's not like stores. It's just the doors.
Just okay.
They go through the door. Which door have you gone through recently with the Offspring?
It's been Ulta, Sephora, but now the Sephora is at Kohl's, so that like helps. So I get to do something, but she gets to do something.
Sephora's in the Kohl's now?
Yeah, so
Wow.
Sephora's in the Kohl's.
I mean, we have Sephora's. Folks, here on Lexington Avenue in Midtown, lots of vacant retail space on Lexington Avenue from the pandemic. The one that stalwart that just plowed through the pandemic was Sephora.
Yeah.
I mean, that place was packed through
the time,
all lockdown every day.
This is right across from Bloomingdale's, folks.
Exactly.
For those
There you
of you across the nation. Jonah Kim, Oliver Chen with the update there on getting through doors to spend Lisa and money.
Gosh.
TD
Great part of
Cowen's
retail.
beauty. I got the official name here. It sounds like Lisa made this up. The TD Cowen's second annual Glowing Ahead.
Perfect.
Beauty
Quite
and
apropos,
Wellness
yes.
Summit. Thank you.
Definitely is.
Thank you, Joan and Oliver, for sending that note over to us. What are we focused on? We're focused on economic data, including a second look at GDP today for Q4. A little bit of nuance there. Could be a surprise. Andrew Hollenhorst scheduled to be with Citigroup. Paul is focused on PCE inflation tomorrow. I'm not sold. You're sold. You think this is a big deal?
I think so. I mean, we know it's big for the Fed, Tom, so I'm going to pay attention if the Fed's going to pay attention. We're
going to pay attention to the two-year yield, 4.10%. Overnight as low as 4.06. A 3.99 two-year, that would be a wow statistic. Futures lift, up 41. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have futures rising, and this is a day after the chipmaker at the center of the AI spending boom delivered good but not so great quarterly numbers. I think the kids call that meh. Yes, but optimism rising. Yes. Shares, they've been fluctuating. Now those shares up 2.5%. So we're starting to see a difference now with those Nvidia shares. So we get to the NASDAQ futures up 0.8%, 183 points. S&P futures up 0.6%. Dow futures up 0.3%. Two-year yield 4.09%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 4 basis points. Globally, European stocks falling. President Trump's threat of 25% tariffs on the EU. Right now, we have the stock 600 down about 0.3%. The DAX in Germany down 0.6%. Those tariff threats actually hitting shares in auto manufacturers in the area. We have Jeep maker Stellantis down nearly 3% in Milan. We were rating results from Warner Brothers Discovery. We have it now, and it's a miss for fourth quarter revenue. Its shares this morning, they were down. Now shares are looking over to it. They're up about 0.1%. Shares of software makers Snowflake, they're higher 12%. Its product revenue forecast beat. It said there's a lot about recently launched projects for artificial intelligence, so that's the reason getting a big boost. But then on the flip side, you have Salesforce, their shares down 3%. Weaker than expected revenue. Investors had higher hopes for those new AI products. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thank you so much. We sit here and watch her do this, and I really can't say enough, folks, about just observing Karen Mosca or Lisa Mateo in real time, bringing you the news at the speed that we demand at Bloomberg. You sit there and you go, it's a gift. No, it's just hard work. And I mean, she gets in. Lisa's ready for the show. I see her security badge. She's in like at 5:35, 5:40, something like that.
No, thank you.
What do you think here? I mean, we've got a lift, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking through the Warner Brothers write-up here. The direct-to-consumer unit, that's the streaming business, Tom, includes their Mac streaming. Showed improvement. They had adjusted EBITDA of $409 million. They added 6.4 new subscribers. I don't know. Is that enough to be competitive with the Netflix of the world? I don't know.
We'll see. We'll do more on that. Just out right now is futures at 40. This is a joy and an important day to speak to Wendy Schiller. She's professor at Brown University, but far more nationally. And forget about the Republican-Democrat thing. Just here is our civics. Second paragraph, this happens to be from the Washington Post, Professor Schiller. The brief administrative order, which did not address the underlying legal issues, will allow time for a full Supreme Court review. Professor Schiller, what should our listeners, either pro-Trump, anti-Trump, anti-Democrat, pro-this, what should we expect from Justice Roberts in the Supreme Court?
Well, I mean, I think, Tom, I go all the way back to John Marshall. I mean, I really do think about Marbury v. Madison. I think about crucial decisions that the court has made in history that shift the balance of power across branches. And that's certainly what Marbury v. Madison did, elevating the Supreme Court's power and reducing president's power. Thomas Jefferson was not happy about that. I think in this case, this isn't just a one-off. There's a whole series of cases that will, in fact, affirm or restrain or expand the president's discretionary power over the money that Congress appropriates across the board. It's not just about AID. It's not just about DEI. It's not about just a single thing. So this is a real moment for Roberts, who's had a number of these really important moments, the immunity decision, obviously, but even going back to Obamacare, affirming Obamacare as a program, but then also limiting the federal government's power to be coercive in how it distributes money. And that's this balancing act that Roberts is facing, I think, right now.
Let's take a given justice. I'm going to go with Whizzer White. Byron White, hugely respected within our Supreme Court history, legitimate college athlete at Colorado, legitimate baseball draftee with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He got to the Supreme Court and he surprised those people that thought Whizzer White would do this, do this, do this. Are we going to get the same surprise from the more conservative members of the court, or do you suggest they'll go lockstep with the president?
I think they're probably literally starting to think about middle ground. I don't know that they'll go completely lockstep, but there's a lot of room in this structure, Articles 1, 2, and even 3 of the Constitution, to have the president exert power. The difference today from any other moment in history is the size and scope of the federal government. That's the big new factor in the sense of this constitutional arrangement. They were writing a constitution for a president that was overseeing a very tiny federal government, and that stayed tiny for more than 100 years. So now we've got something that affects everybody's daily life. What does that mean? How much responsibility does the president have in power, and how much does Congress have a say in it? And this is going to be crucial going forward because of the scope of the federal government. It really does affect everybody's life. And that's where the court now has so much more at stake, not just for the separation of powers, but for its own survival. If you give the president, free reign over everything, what's to say he's not going to want changes in the court or ignore the court? So the court's survival in terms of being influential here is also on the line.
Professor, we had President Trump's first cabinet meeting yesterday, televised, and we had Mr. Musk there. What did you take away from that cabinet meeting?
Well, I mean, it's something you could not even imagine to even like in a movie, like you wouldn't even, wag the dog, that movie about sort of a fake war. We thought, these things can't ever happen. I never in my days teaching ever thought this would be the first photo of a major cabinet meeting. I thought Trump was doing Trump. He was sort of giving Elon Musk a little bit, of shade at some point, but then also reaffirming Musk's authority. He clearly wants to walk away with a definitive, visible cut in the size of the federal workforce. And whoever can get there first will be Trump's favorite. And so right now it's Musk. But if it starts to cause some backlash and problems, he'll just instruct all of his cabinet members to do that and literally say, do it or you're fired. I mean, this is the way he will run the cabinet. So it was a bit surreal, but you could see that Trump was power playing even within his own cabinet, which every president does, by the way.
It's interesting. I mean, I think, you looked around the table and you saw Mr. Musk. And I figure if you're a cabinet person, this is kind of the peak of your political career. You've become, you're heading up a big department within the U.S. government, but I guess you kind of have to report to Mr. Musk. Is that kind of the vibe taken from yesterday?
Well, I mean, certainly it's the public visible vibe, but of course, underneath and behind the scenes, you're going to see cabinet members. Now they're confirmed, and the FBI is an awfully powerful place. The Treasury is an awfully powerful place. I think these people will assert themselves behind the scenes constantly with Trump, trying to sort of minimize Musk's capacity to tell them what to do. But we have real things happening. Sadly, somebody died. I think at least one person has died of measles in Texas. That's something that RFK has to deal with as a cabinet member. There are things that will happen that will affect people, that will be negative. What does Trump do then? Does he blame Musk or does he blame Kennedy? And they're all trying to basically avoid blame for the backlash and the bad things that will happen from making such drastic, visible cuts so quickly.
One final question. What do you glean is the relationship between the leadership of the GOP Senate and the GOP House?
I knew you were going to ask me this. I did some homework before I came on, Tom.
Yes.
So already the Senate Republican majority leader is already saying, yeah, that House resolution that barely passed, that was lauded as a political victory 24 hours ago, yeah, we're not taking that. We're not interested in that one. That's not going to do it for us. We want lots of changes, in particular Medicaid. This is where senators represent entire states. They deal with governors much more frequently, and they understand that all the people in the state are affected. Medicaid affects states. So this is where you see the institutional design of the House and Senate really coming through, particularly on Medicaid on this budget resolution. They said the tax cuts weren't permanent enough. I'm not sure what that means. George W. Bush wanted permanent tax cuts. It's hard to do. So the Senate is already planting its flag and telling the House that there's a lot of work to be done.
Professor, you get an A. Thank you so much. Good. Wendy Schiller, Brown University. I really appreciate her input. Get tons of feedback, pro and con, for Professor Schiller. She incites thinking, which is what we do. That's pretty cool when someone who's a heavyweight civics person like her, she's preparing for Paul Sweeney
and Tom Keene. Exactly. So, it's interesting to see how the House and the Senate are going to deal with this budget issue. And, this is going to be a fight, as it always is, I guess.
I mean, when David Gura comes on, he doesn't prepare for us.
No, please.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, whatever. Gura scheduled later. There's been a Gura sighting.
Really? I haven't seen him in forever.
Is he here today? Do we have Gura?
He's supposed to be in studio.
It's been a rumor. The control room. They're awake in the control room. Bonus.
Very good. Yep.
On a Thursday, that's good. Thank you.
Not in the building. Okay.
There's been no Gura sighting yet. We'll see if we.
The Brooklyn crowd comes in a little bit later, is what I understand.
They do. And, Tim was in yesterday. That was the high point of the show yesterday. I was told. Carol emailed me and said that was the high point of the show. Tim Stenovic
absolutely.
With us.
Tim Stenovic coming in.
With the Nvidia coverage yesterday afternoon. They may have a press conference, a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, President of the United States. We're trying to get an exact time on that. I'll tell you one-ish, but it may be later. We'll see on that as well. We're on YouTube. I have what do I have? The guy on YouTube with the headline, Mr. Beast?
Yeah.
He has a $5 billion valuation.
Wow. Good for him.
On YouTube. Lisa Mateo has a $6 billion valuation on YouTube. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Matei. We've got futures advancing, investors kind of waiting to see whether more economic data out today will also add to that feeling that an economic slowdown is on the way. In just under an hour from now, we get a read on U.S. GDP, durable goods, initial jobless claims, and that'll be followed by PCE, inflation, income, and spending tomorrow. Ahead of that right now, let's check NASDAQ futures up 0.9%, 191 points. S&P futures up 0.7%. Dow futures up 0.3%. The two-year yield 4.09%. That's up 2 basis points, and the yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 3 basis points. To commodities, we have COMEX gold down 1%, $2,899 an ounce. We have Brent crude $73 a barrel. That's up about 1%. Shares of Papa John's Pizza, well, it's off about 6%, a beat for fourth quarter adjusted EPS, so that's why those shares are higher. Rolls-Royce, though, resumed shareholder payouts after a 5-year break, raised its earnings forecast. Its shares are up 17% in London. On the flip side, we have eBay. Their shares falling. They're off about 7%. Projected sales the current quarter missed estimates. Soft demand in Germany and the UK. But what's also interesting is that sales of refurbished products, that's actually growing faster than new goods on the platform. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Great. Lisa, thanks so much. Really eclectic there, particularly in Rolls-Royce. Thank you for that this morning. Robert Schiffman, moments ago, publishing on Nvidia. I want to explain this. Pros in equity always follow the credit research of the stocks they hold. I learned this the hard way when Amazon blew up years ago. Lehman Brothers saved me with their credit analysis, and the wonderful Holly Guthrie at Janney Montgomery Scott was a leader there on credit research. Nvidia is on track for record high revenue. They look for a credit rating upside potential off of AA3, AA minus to the top of semiconductor peers as well. It maintains one of the sector's lowest debt to equity ratios. It's a very constructive outlook.
Yeah.
Which you'd expect.
I'd hit the market.
But when you do equities, folks, you can't just be, I mean, this is Ritholtz 101 with his wonderful new book. You got to pay attention to what the debt people say as well. We have that advantage in technology with Robert Schiffman at Bloomberg Intelligence. Our advantage as well, particularly on currencies, is a litmus paper. The global system is Audrey Child-Friedman joining us from London right now. Audrey, I got to go to yen. Paul's mentioned it, but we've really sort of ignored it, and we can't. We got a big figure move in yen, stronger yen with a 149 right now, down from the panic of a 160 stronger yen. What is your scope and scale? Not a prediction, but what is your scope and scale for further yen strength? Don't tell me we're going back through 100 to 90.
Well, the timing there is tricky, but the direction is very clear, Tom. The direction is for dollar yen downside. We started the year with the argument, mainly from my perspective anyway, the argument was mainly driven by, the international context, the scope for upside in currencies, which I call defensive FX currencies, such as the yen, as well as what was, in my opinion, what was a more supportive context domestically for Japan, with the Bank of Japan, continuing normalization, the Japanese economy growing, inflation a concern in Japan, and all those drivers that had been so negative for the yen for years have been turning already. So that was the beginning of the year on the domestic front, and now on top of that, we are starting to get some question marks about the U.S. economy, and that's adding onto the scope for downside on dollar yen, I think. So levels 145 is what you look at first before talking about 190, but the direction is clear.
Right, Audrey, I'm looking at our listeners, our viewers, people like Lisa Mateo. All they're looking at with Japan is the Aman Kyoto costs $2,500 a night, as a hotel. Why should we care about strong yen? Sell to Americans right now why they should pay attention to strong yen.
Well, I think, currencies, tell you a lot about what the global investor is thinking and how global investors are approaching diversification strategies, capital flows. So, the currency also tells you to some extent what people are thinking about, where they want to put their money. And for years, Japan wasn't a place that was looking to be appealing. And it was all about the US. And, the US certainly still has appeal, but it's not just about the US anymore. And because Europe there's so many question marks about Europe still. I think Asia. We also have not an all clear from China, and in that context, Japan is looking very appealing, and that's why I'm very confident that this stronger yen story has room to extend further.
Audrey, I'm trying to get the euro to parity for Tom for his next visit to Paris or Rome or wherever. That seems to be off the table now a little bit. How do you think about the euro?
It's not happening, Tom. I'm sorry. You're going to have to spend more money. I just feel that, we had so many reasons to push euro-dollar to parity at the very beginning of the year in terms, not only from a U.S. Upside narrative perspective, but also from, the European politics, which were looking very shaky then, and the situation on the geopolitical front with the Russia-Ukraine situation. And while I'm not saying it's an all clear on those two fronts, I think we are in a better position now than we were at the beginning of the year. The Eurozone economic underperformance continues versus the US, but that's priced in. And the other point I would make is that everything is relative in FX. So if we were to get a confirmation that the recent softness we're seeing in the survey in the US economy are filtering through onto the hard data for the US, and the US growth narrative is starting to weaken, that will then have quite a significant impact on euro-dollar. And I think we will then contemplate moving away from 105, but to the upside, to 107, right. 108 initially, and even a push towards 110. But we need to see what happens with the US economy first.
Audrey, thank you so much. Too short a visit. Audrey Child-Friedman in London at Queen Victoria Street. Futures advance up 42. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Hollywood star Gene Hackman and his wife have been found dead at their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, alongside their dog. Early reports suggest that there was no foul play involved. Hackman was known for several movie roles, including Popeye Doyle in the 1971 classic, The French Connection.
All right, Popeye's here. Get your hands on your heads. Get off the bar and get on the wall.
Hackman also won the Cecil B. DeMille Award back in January of 2003.
Few people ever get what they really want in life. You give up a lot in terms of family, and one thing, you're always in North Africa or Spain or someplace. But it's a make-believe world, and as I say, it's what I wanted to do as a child, and I fulfilled a lot of my dreams.
Gene Hackman was 95. Hamas says it is ready to negotiate the next phase of the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip after handing over the remains of 4 hostages in exchange for the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. The truce is set to end this weekend. Former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy.
Since they haven't agreed to enter into the second phase, that means the cessation of hostilities could be over and fighting could resume. And we've seen steps taken by the IDF, both mobilizing units and calling up reservists, that indicate that might actually happen.
Meanwhile, days ahead of the ceasefire expiration, Israel says it will not withdraw from the Gaza-Egypt border. The Supreme Court is stepping in overnight to grant a request from the Trump administration, pumping the brakes on the payment of billions in foreign aid. At issue, nearly $2 billion in foreign aid payments the administration has frozen. A lower court judge ordered the government to unfreeze those payments by midnight last night, but an order from Chief Justice John Roberts has now pushed back the deadline. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom Pollak.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. So we had huge response yesterday to Paul Sweeney's analysis of Netflix. People really interested in that as it climbs up into a lot of large cap growth portfolios. Warner Brothers Digital, I look at this, the streaming share, and I don't think we can say this enough. We've all got like Peacocks in my living room. Paramount's in my living room. That's CBS, right? sort of.
Peacock is NBC.
No,
and
but
Paramount. Yes, exactly right.
They can't survive.
I don't know.
They're not like Avis.
They're
not like Enterprise.
I don't know.
Car rental.
Yeah, that's what the market's trying to figure out, Tom. We asked Rich Greenfield yesterday. We had him on yesterday, and he says, you got a couple of big winners in Netflix and Disney. And everybody else. Yes,
Spotify.
Exactly. Spotify. Another great call.
I'm not hip enough. Lisa has Spotify.
Oh, she's totally into it. Yeah.
Futures up 40. We say good morning. Bloomberg's surveillance.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo.
Good morning, everyone. The newspaper's the front pages, the Lisa Mateo moment. It's brought to you by IBKR. Will the year-over-year change in the U.S. PPI, will it exceed 3% this February 2025 at IBKR Forecast Trader? The yes was recently at 39%, 39%. What's your take? Trade your prediction at ibkr.com/forecast. First, I got a report. I ordered eggs. I got eggs yesterday.
You did?
Ready. $12.99 a dozen.
You're lying.
No.
Oh my gosh. Well, if
That's the only reason I got eggs. I'm the only one dumb enough east of the Mississippi to spend $12.99.
I'm gonna break it down and show you exactly one of the reasons why you're paying so much, and it doesn't have to do so much. Well, it has to do with so much about the bird flu, but another reason too behind it. So if you go to the Wall Street Journal, they have this really, really interesting take. First of all, you have the U.S. government saying, right, they're going to import eggs. They want to start doing that. The Agriculture Department, they want to invest as much as $1 billion to address these egg costs. So where are they coming from? Okay, so the U.S. imports eggs. It actually does do this from places like Canada, Taiwan, Lithuania. They want to increase shipments from Turkey. That's what the sources are saying. But shipping eggs has a challenge because the unfrozen eggs, they can only last about 5 weeks. So that's one challenge. But would increasing the imports really drop the egg prices? Experts are saying, you know what, it could help. But the problem is that why the prices have been pushed so high is because consumers are now stockpiling. So if you go to your neighbor's fridge and they have like dozens of eggs lined up, people are panic buying.
Can I ask you a dumb question? How long do they last in your fridge?
Yeah, 5 weeks.
In your
That's what they're
refrigerator?
saying. Yeah.
5 weeks.
Okay.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so they only have a certain shelf life, but people are like, remember the whole toilet paper thing, you know, and people are doing it.
My question, and we do have a guest in Bloomberg Intelligence. I asked our producer Mark to get a guest who could answer this question.
You speak to your producers.
How long does it take? Can I just go out and like grow another chicken or a hen or whatever they are to lay some eggs? How long does this take to fix this?
I don't.
That's my question. That's all I want to know.
But I'm sure, it's a good question. Like, how long does a chicken have to be before it can lay an egg? Like, how long does this process take? I don't know.
There's so many. On which side of the road?
Which came first?
Okay, can we next?
Yeah.
Okay. This one goes to what we were talking about, Warner Brothers. So this was an interesting story from Business Week. Warner Discovery's CEO, David Zaslav, right? He's been saying that the movie co-heads, they're just burning through cash. So he pointed to the latest Joker movie. He says there's these mounting costs, upcoming releases. It was during a meeting with those two co-heads because in 2025, they're going to release some movies that have been higher production costs, but they don't think are going to make as much. So you have Mickey 17, One Battle After Another. Those are two of those movies. But it just shows the struggles that they've kind of affected their earnings too as well.
How much does a movie cost nowadays? Like
a minimum of $100 million. And then,
100 million.
Yeah, and then you go up to $200 million.
And they hide the marketing costs, right?
Well, the marketing code, whatever the budget to make the movie is, and add that same number. So if it makes $100 million to make, you have to spend $100 million to market.
For example, if the actress in the movie is on Jimmy Kimmel, that's not in the budget. That's like hidden.
No, and then the whole back end. So the big issue, this has been the beginning of time in Hollywood, Tom. These movie makers like to spend lots of money, and then their corporate bosses say, whoa, 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 whoa.
Too much.
So okay, one more quick.
One more. YouTube star Mr. Beast. Okay, sources are saying he wants to raise a couple $100 million. It's a funding round. Could value his company at $5 billion. But I didn't realize, I mean, my kids he has a reality TV show on Amazon Prime, Beast Games. It was huge. Amazon gave him $100 million for it. He actually lost money on that production because he put too much into it. So now, this funding can help because Amazon wants to make more seasons of the show because it was so big. But this guy has packaged goods. He has a media business. He has so much, generated more than $400 million in sales last year. So this is huge.
That's the future.
Yeah, and he's raised money in the past. Firm, what is it? Alpha Wave Global has invested in him in the past. But this is a big thing for $5 billion. He's in the supermarket when I go there. My kids are watching him on their phones. It's a lot.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. The newspapers this morning, greatly appreciate it. I got fingers left over for if I was to tell you, listen to an entire album, this would be one of them. Mr. Springsteen.
Little stool takes money from my hand while his eyes take a walk all over you. Hands me 2 tickets, smiles, and whispers good luck. Well, cuddle up, angel, cuddle up, my little dove, and we'll ride down, baby, into this tunnel of love.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What's the immediate take of a tariff war?
For the longest time, technology has been the driver of this market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump declared a national emergency at the U.S. border with Mexico.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo, and Michael Barr. Mateo, out on YouTube live chat, they're talking up Lisa big today.
I know. And the eggs, the eggs are big.
Good morning. Are we going to start calling Michael Barr Mr. Beast?
Yeah.
Would that work? Can we get a valuation off of that? Good morning, everyone on YouTube across the nation, your living room. Good morning in the dorms of UCLA. Andrew Hollenhorst with us here in a moment. At your offices, seriously, on YouTube. Just stunned at the response we've seen there. It's not a $5 billion valuation, but I'll take a cup of Sanka and say thank you. And on your commute across the nation as well. Good morning, Bloomberg 1130 in New York. Really appreciate the tri-state love this morning. We've got lots going on in economics. I've a little bit ignoring economics. There's some distractions in Washington. Andrew Hollenhorst will join us from Citigroup in a moment. Should be an hour conversation. We'll squeeze it in as we can. Let's get right to it with futures up 37 from the Interactive Broker Studios of Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo.
All right, we have Nasdaq futures leading the charge this morning. This is after Nvidia's results drew a mixed response. Investors, they were just used to getting these blowout results. The shares have been all over the map this morning. Right now, they're up more than 2.5%. We go to Nasdaq futures up 0.8%. S&P futures up 0.6%. Dow futures up 0.2%. We have the 2-year yield 4.09%. That's up 2 basis points, and the yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 3 basis points. To currencies, we have the Japanese yen. The biggest decliner against the dollar right now. It's at 149.62 against the dollar. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. To earnings, and we go to a theme at media companies that gains in streaming, well, they just can't seem to offset those declines in traditional TV. We heard that from Warner Brothers Discovery today. Fourth quarter sales missed, dragged down by its traditional TV business, but maybe investors like the increase of subscribers because the shares are up nearly 1%. And then after the close yesterday, we heard a similar story from Paramount Global. Its shares, though, down 2%. Fourth quarter sales and profit fell short. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Paul, what do you have?
Tom from Summit, New Jersey writes in, chickens need to be between 16 and 21 weeks old to begin laying eggs. So let's just make some more chickens. Why can't we do that? We're going to get to the bottom of this by the end of today.
This is what it's become.
This is
Goldman Sachs years ago did the whole agricultural timeline of pigs and cows. And there may have been chickens in there too.
It might have been. Yep.
It was like 40 pages, and I read the whole thing. It was absolutely brilliant. So thank you for that. That's good.
Tom from Summit. Thank you.
Andrew, I paid $12.99 last night for eggs just to get them.
You're the only one still buying them, yeah.
That's it. There was a tantrum in the house. Get eggs or we die. Joining us now, the chief U.S. economist at Citigroup, Andrew Hollenours. Andrew, I'm like everybody else in the media. We got all these distractions. I just want to have peace and calm and talk about economics. The data tomorrow, what could it signal to Jerome Powell?
This is critical data, and I think you're right, Tom. There's been really less attention that's being paid to the macroeconomic data because we have so many other things that are going on right now. But if we just step back and look at what's going on with inflation, I think that's the most important story that we've seen early this year. And we had 2 months in November and December where we had much softer, much slower core inflation. And then we had this weird January, and every January has been weird, where you have the so-called residual seasonality, which is a term that everybody in America knows now, which is that it just means that the January inflation data tend to come in really strong. We saw that in core CPI, but core PCE tomorrow, I know I'm going to sound like a Fed official or an economist here, but core PCE is the thing to look at. It's going to come in softer, and the year-on-year reading is going to come down, and inflation is cooling.
We mourn Gene Hackman. One of the Gene Hackmans of economics was Axel Leonovid at UCLA. Yeah. He was brave. I'm not going to go into it, folks. I don't want to waste time on this. Is one guy wrote in JSTOR once, he was like a Marine coming out of the trenches. What would Axel Leonovid say about our ability to predict inflation out 6 months or out 6 years?
Yeah, I think that's where we really need to be humble, right? And that's where we need to look at the last 5 years of inflation data, right? People have been all over the map in terms of what they were predicting and where things came out. So I think we really do need a lot of humility when you think about forecasting these things going out. Now, what I think we're better at as a profession is the next month, the next couple months, and that's where we're looking at things like shelter prices that have slowed down that are probably going to stay slower, and that's why there's some confidence that we do have this slowing in inflation. Now, all kinds of policy uncertainty on top of that, but if I just look at the economics, if I just look at what's going on with inflation here, it is slowing. That's going to be encouraging for Fed officials.
As Tom was mentioning, we in the media, we pay attention to some of the narratives out there, whether it be tariffs, whether it be changes in immigration policy. Does that factor into your modeling of inflation?
Yeah, so you have to think about those things, especially as we get out towards the end of this year when you can see some of those effects really coming in. So, how high will those tariffs be? That's a key question. I think we're all waiting for that April 2nd, I guess is the date now, when we should know something on the reciprocal tariffs.
What is the confidence in the Fed parlor game? I hate it so much, the gaming out of what the Fed will do. Do you have a belief at Citigroup, or are you really hanging on data dependency?
I think data dependency is critical. I mean, this is really what we've heard from Fed officials, that partly because of what you were just mentioning with the policy uncertainty that's out there, they want to wait, they want to stop, they want to see where are the data coming in, and then where is the policy going to go. I think by May, by June, we have some Fed meetings in those months, they should have more clarity around those things, but right now it's basically a pause.
I mean, I'm looking at the 10-year Treasury. We're already down to 4.3%. It feels like the market's kind of pricing it in a little bit here. What do you make of this pullback in rates?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think there are a couple of things going on there. One is the inflation story. I think the market is coming around to inflation, is cooling cyclically. I think it's also been some of the sentiment data that we've had, and you want to be really careful with that sentiment data because at the end of the day, I mean, I guess every economist would say this, you want to pay attention to what people are doing, not what they're telling you they're going to do. So consumer sentiment has come down. I'm kind of less focused on that. What was really interesting was to see the PMI for the services sector, right? This is above 50 when you're expanding. It's below 50 when you're contracting. Yep. We've had just solidly well above 50 services PMI. All of a sudden, it's sub 50. So is that telling us that we're slowing down there? So I think the market pricing in maybe a little bit of a slowdown.
To go to your academics in LA, I just noticed Instagram's got all these ratings. Like UCLA is #1 rated like state mega college complex.
How about that whole UC system, Tom? How many?
It's America. It is, seriously.
Millions of people is it educated?
I used to get lectured at the dining room table about the miracle that California wrought. Andrew Hollenhorst, the great thing of Meltzer was to aggregate data. And I'd argue with Professor Meltzer of Carnegie Mellon and UCLA, you can't aggregate in a barbell economy like this. It's Citigroup's research. How barbell are we now between the haves and the have-nots?
Yeah, it's a huge gulf between the two right now. And by the way, I should say a great debt of that gratitude to the UC system. I mean, just public school all the way through, and I can't be happier.
And then you were corrupted. You came east.
Yes. Then I came to the East Coast. Yeah, that's another story. But in terms of aggregating the data, you're absolutely right, Tom. I mean, you look at the lower end of the income distribution, the lower end of the wealth distribution. That excess savings that we were talking about, that's not there for people that are, sub 50th percentile in terms of the wealth distribution. That's right. been eaten through. So you really do have some pain that's happening at the bottom of the distribution.
Can I ask a John Farrow question?
Please.
When does the Fed cut rates?
we think they'll come back and cut in May. It could be May. It could be June.
You don't have any certitude in that. With the madness going, you're going to put a 25% tariff on a Porsche, Paul's next car?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, ask me again April 2nd, and I'll have a better answer for you.
Right now, the Sweeney yield, the 10-year, you get a 2-year yield of a 3.99. Doesn't that signal low 2%, even 1% real GDP?
Yeah, I think it is reflecting a slowdown in GDP growth, and I think we will slow. I mean, we had this pullback in consumer spending in the month of January, but it's 1 month of data. Okay. So again, to your point, ask me again in April, and I think we'll have a better idea.
See, there we are. There's your data dependency. When did the dots go?
Yeah, they're going to do a review of the communication. I think that the dots have been a lot more trouble.
Right. Dr. Hollenhorst, thank you so much. I got a choice: Andrew Hollenhorst or Caroline Hyde.
No,
Andrew,
easy choice.
See ya. Goodbye. Andrew Hollenhorst, thank you so much in our studio here this morning. What matters here at Bloomberg is the conversation. And the tech people won't talk to me because I ask questions that they really get upset about. PR for one of the Mag 7s once said to me, "Not a chance. I'm over your dead body." Caroline Hyde is different with Bloomberg Technology. First of all, when does Ed Ludlow come back?
He's having a beautiful time with his baby. I think he's going to hopefully come back in about May.
Okay.
Of 2026.
Yeah, that's what paternity leave looks like.
That's like a British thing. We're off for a year or whatever. Caroline Hyde with us with an important conversation today on Amazon. What is your curiosity from the CEO of Amazon?
My curiosity has to feed in many ways to the AI questions that linger. They put forward that about $100 billion run rate is what they're going to spend in terms of capital expenditure. Wow. But what is that in terms of AI spend? And what does that look like in terms of the compute capacity needed? You started off the week, I'm sure, looking at that note out of TD Cowen where Microsoft was potentially over too much capacity now in terms of data centers. Is that true? So we want to dig into some of the AI questions. We want to dig into, of course, Alexa Plus and the new AI, generative AI infused Alexa, and just what that means in terms of you and I using this stuff.
Do you have one in your house?
Don't tell Andy Jassy, but I'm a Google Home kind of a person.
Oh, so we're an Alexa home. Lisa, what do you do? We're an Alexa home.
We have nothing.
No.
Thank you.
I do not believe it.
You do not.
She's not talking to herself. She's not summoning tech.
Yes, I know. We're doing that. It's interesting, Amazon, the stock's kind of flat this year, but this is a company I think we all grew up as Amazon watchers. This is a company that doesn't care about its stock. They just invest.
Frugality is part of their principles, right?
So is that still the play, I guess, as they continue to grow their cloud business, as they continue to grow their AI? Is the message still in, we're going to invest whatever we need to invest to become players, to remain leaders?
But also with a focus on frugality and efficiency. Remember, he's trying to delayer at the moment. He's trying to strip out the layers, the bureaucracy. And he's managed to balance. The investor base have loved the fact.
From your research, and seriously, what we see on Bloomberg Technology, the grind of it every day with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow, is Mr. Bezos involved in Amazon? Is he like Gates where he's gone? Or is he like on the phone? Andy!
Well, what's interesting is,
today.
I'm going to...
Tom Keene wants to know.
Tom Keene wants to know how much Trump thinks of as Amazon is Bezos or Amazon is Andy Jassy. Because if you look at the lineup on Inauguration Day, it was the Google CEO, it was the Meta CEO, but then it was Bezos, the founder.
Is that
so
right?
it is interesting that we've got this notable sort of focus on where...
Interesting.
And I should point out, with the upset at the Washington Post yesterday over Bloomberg opinion, one of the great supporters of surveillance was David Shipley, who walked away from the Post yesterday. Paul, another one to carry, please.
So Amazon, do we talk about the retail, the business at all anymore? The e-commerce business anymore? The actual kind of what on the...
Because AWS was the profit spinner, but the money spinner is still e-commerce. And all of this is this flywheel effect that they have. And ultimately, when they speak about being vertically integrated with making their own chips, providing cloud and giving you AI, they're also doing the good stuff on investing in distribution, on making sure that you can get your latest and greatest Amazon product to you in one day.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Oh, stop. They tried
gonna be
one
by the
day
end
and
of
it
this...
never worked.
UK, it works beautifully
month.
in the same day.
Really? Same day in the UK?
Jersey Shore,
it's a smaller
same
country.
day.
SpaceX delivered to New Jersey.
Speaking of the UK, I got to go here. I mean, Caroline Hyde, PPE out of Oxford, which is French for philosophy, politics, and economics. What do your parents think about you going over the dark side and doing semi technology? I mean, are your parents, are they like, oh my God, our daughter's doing technology? They're like, what happened?
Well, you should see the Christmas table when my husband talks about the crypto job that he has, and the minds just melt. But look, I mean, you hear Keir Starmer trying to focus on AI. You've heard about the UK government trying to drill in some sort of viewpoint that they are still at the cutting edge of innovation. Everyone wants a bit of this tech pie, right?
Let's bring you over to PPE to finish up. What should we listen for in America from the Prime Minister today as he visits with the President?
I wonder if anything will be said about Elon Musk. You've got to remember the absolute chaos that the focus of Elon Musk on Keir Starmer and his government has driven across the entire nation. They are not buying his cars. They have
I saw that.
We're starting to see this real pushback, and I wonder whether Keir Starmer will start to speak to. Look, if we're going to have US-UK relations, please let them be between Trump and Starmer rather than Elon and Starmer.
What time is this event today with Mr. Jassy?
11 a.m. Tune in.
Oh, 11 a.m.
Perfect.
Okay.
We're carrying that.
I'm confused.
We're
The press conference is in the afternoon.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
Amazon CEO.
Well, thank you, Caroline.
Jassy, that'd be
Thank you.
great.
I'm looking at my watch here on the swatch. I don't think she's ever been in this early.
No, they're
It's
stars.
incredible.
You just got to
TV
ask.
stars.
I'm there.
She's usually there at 10:05. Caroline,
Thank you very
so
much,
much.
Caroline.
Really timely conversation with the leadership of Amazon today. Let's do a data check here, and I got to go to the Sweeney yield futures up 37, Dow futures up 109. The VIX comes in a stick, 17.84. And Paul, that 2-year yield, I'm sorry, under 410, 4.08%.
Yeah, I mean, the market's kind of telling you they're seeing maybe rates coming back here a little bit. We had some economic data that suggested that maybe the Fed can be a little bit more accommodative. So we're kind of back to that 2 cuts this year kind of priced into the market, I guess.
Andrew Hollenhorst was a breath of fresh air.
Yep.
I mean, it's just nice to talk like data.
All right, here's the best mascot,
Inflation.
I think, in all of America, and it's part of the UC system. UC Santa Barbara, banana slugs. That's the mask. Yes. UC Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz.
Okay, that explains that.
Banana slugs. I don't know what a banana slug is, but it's the greatest mascot ever. Great T-shirts, by the way.
I figure, Lisa, a stud like Sweeney, are you at Carmel by Sea? Are you there with Clinton, the rest of them?
Yeah, we were there for 25 years.
$12 latte?
Yep, absolutely. We were there for a long time.
Okay, very
Love
cool.
Carmel.
Oh, very good. Futures up 37. Michael Barr and I are going, what happened to our lives? With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. 2-time Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman has died at the age of 95, along with his wife and their dog at their home in Santa Fe. Hackman was in numerous films, including the 1986 movie Hoosiers as Coach Norman Dale.
I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game. In my book, we're going to be winners. Okay?
Hackman also starred in the 1972 hit The Poseidon Adventure and The French Connection. A cause of death has not been provided. The deaths are a mystery after authorities say no foul play was involved. President Trump gave some apparent mixed messages on tariffs at his first cabinet meeting. At one point, he said tariffs on Canada and Mexico are still on for next week, but later said they'd kick in April 2nd. It wasn't clear if he was talking about 25% tariffs on those two countries or reciprocal tariffs around the world. Terry Haynes is the founder of Pangea Policy.
Everybody's spitballing a little bit to give everybody some room and maintain a United States negotiating advantage. But, they don't have to make a decision on, say, reciprocal tariffs, for example, until April. And before then, largely what's going to happen in negotiations is going to be dependent upon what other countries come back to the United States with.
Terry Haynes of Pangea Policy was a guest on Bloomberg Daybreak. The measles outbreak in West Texas turns deadly as the first person to die from the disease, a school-aged child, has been reported from the center of the outbreak. Dr. Amy Thompson is the CEO of Covenant Health System in Lubbock.
We also want to continue to emphasize that vaccination is the best way to prevent the spread of this virus and to prevent the severe complications.
Dr. Thompson says all of the patients treated at Covenant, including the child who died, were not vaccinated. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you. Heads up for Global Wall Street, scheduled for Tuesday because, getting Balchunas in from Philadelphia is just so darn hard.
Yep.
He has put out a blistering note for Global Wall Street on exchange-traded funds. Here's the single line. The SPDR, SSGA, Apollo, IG, Public and Private Credit, ETF, the fund seeks to maximize risk-adjusted return and provide current income. Balchunas says this is a seismic event. That's his language.
So this is my private credit ETF type of thing?
Yeah, and there's rules that they're getting around, and Eric says the SEC is allowing them to quote on. I'm just editorializing. Yeah. I don't want to sound like an expert, but I got take out all the marketing baloney. I got an Apollo investment grade public and private credit ETF.
Oh, all right.
That's a short.
That's it. All right.
Tuesday, Balchunas will be with us. I'm sure he'll write before then.
If the Amtrak Acela is on time. We have to caveat it.
He's put out an absolutely blistering note on this for Global Wall Street. The symbol is PRIV. Private.
I like it? Yep, I get it.
They didn't do PUBL. No. They did PRIV.
I like that.
Priv equity is what's coming down the pike. This from Apollo IG. And from Apollo, I should say. And Mr. Balchunas scheduled to be with us Tuesday. A lift to the market, maybe not out to peak, but nevertheless up 38. The level on Dow futures, 43,600. It's a terrible drawdown.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just amazing how we've pulled back.
Exactly. So we're popping back up again today. Yeah.
I mean,
the market took into stride the Nvidia numbers. We got past that. It could have moved the market.
But the news flow as well is extraordinary. Yeah. The VIX 17.82. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
For the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We're just minutes away from more economic data. We're talking about a read on U.S. GDP, durable goods, initial jobless claims. We will keep you posted on that. Ahead of it right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.8%, S&P futures up 0.5%, Dow futures are up about 0.2%. We have the 2-year yield at 4.09%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that's up 2 basis points. To commodities, COMEX gold down nearly 1%, $2,902 an ounce. We go to Brent crude, $73 a barrel. That's up more than 1%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. Shares of Moderna, they're off about 4%. Sources saying U.S. health officials, they're reevaluating this $590 million contract for bird flu shots that the Biden administration actually awarded to the company. Now, we have other companies making news, like Nissan, said to be planning to replace its CEO after those poor earnings and also the collapse of talks with Honda. And this story stood out to me. Central banks are hitting Instagram to reach a younger audience. They're using memes, influencers, reggae songs, you name it. Leading the pack, Venezuela, nearly 2 million followers. The Fed has over 200,000. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Business Flash.
The Fed Instagram account is going to feature the Grateful Dead. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Who knows? But they have 200,000. But Venezuela, 2 million followers. Their central bank.
Nice.
Okay.
She's a
Insta,
font of
the
wisdom.
IG.
Who knew?
I don't have it in front of me now, but I got somebody up north growing. Do you grow chickens? I raise them.
Raise chickens.
Raise chickens.
You can raise chickens. Yes.
And it's like you said. It's like 15 weeks until the egg.
Yeah. So let's.
I know
let's get
nothing
moving
about
on this.
Like the chicken makes an
Charlie
egg.
Pellet did a story. You can rent them. You can rent the chickens.
Vet Bill and Kennel Fee would love that. Couple chickens in the house.
There you go.
Why not? Okay.
Lots of chicken farms in North Carolina and Virginia, I remember.
We're talking chickens and eggs. You think Julia Pollak wants to come on after that?
She's
joining us right now. Huge response when Julia Pollak's on. She's with ZipRecruiter, really as a chief U.S. economist, a starkly different take on the labor economy. Julia, we had, not ZipRecruiter, he's from a small internet firm, Citigroup. Andrew Hollenhorst was just on, saying there seemed to be a little bit of cracks in the employment armor. Do you agree?
I think it's too soon to tell. So on the one hand, you have consumer confidence falling. There's so many new things happening. We know that uncertainty can be a drag on investment and hiring as companies wait for clarity. So it's possible that that is happening. We also know that some specific companies are concerned about tariffs and the effect on their businesses. But we also know that there are many, many employers who are basically euphoric. They expect far fewer investigations from the government. They expect looser, more favorable regulation, a better business environment. So it's a really mixed bag at the moment, and we don't know how it's going to work out in the aggregate figures. I expect this jobs report will still be a pretty strong one.
So what drives, just stepping back here, if I'm a corporation, what drives my hiring strategy on a kind of a 6 to 12 month basis?
So you look at the market, you see the products and services that you are producing, you see how much you are able to make for them. If you see an opportunity to expand into a new product line or a new service and make money, if the profit is going to be positive, the revenue will exceed the costs, then you go for it. There are lots of reasons that people hold back and try to hire fewer people. One, the tax code encourages it. You hire a person, you pay payroll tax. You get a machine, you get a full tax write-off. So we have a couple of things that we need to do in this country to make sure that what's not inevitable, it doesn't happen because we force it to. So people are worried that robots will take over jobs. Well, our policies kind of encourage that. There are also states with very, very tough labor laws where employers are terrified of hiring someone because they're worried they won't be able to terminate them without being sued. So there are lots of things that make employers hold back.
Julia, we're going to do the economic data here in a moment. Julia Pollak with us with ZipRecruiter. Let's go back to first principles. What do you see distinctive in ZipRecruiter? Fossils like us look at it and go, oh, it's internet, it's people, on a laptop at Starbucks trying to find a job so they can work from home 4 days a week. That's a stereotype. Julia Pollak, what do you see at ZipRecruiter? What's unique at your website effort?
So the difficulty in the labor market is that this is the most heterogeneous market on the planet. No jobs are the same and no workers are the same. And so there's a tremendously difficult matching problem. And that's where ZipRecruiter comes in. We help connect the right employers with the right jobs at the right moment. And that is not a trivial problem.
Let's talk just about wages here, Julia. I mean, it seems like wage growth is pretty darn solid. Yes, inflation's a big, big issue for all consumers out there, but wage growth has been pretty darn good. Does that seem solid to you?
Yeah, wage growth has exceeded inflation now for about 2 years. And I think workers are starting to feel that. After 25 months of negative real wage growth in 2021, 2022 made them feel pretty gloomy. Many are feeling less financial strain now. In our job seeker confidence surveys, we've seen the financial index go up a lot in the last few months.
All right. Let me give you the economic data. We do this for Julia Pollak at ZipRecruiter. We say good morning to all of you. Futures were up 30, 35. We're watching right now. Seems to be a lift this morning. GDP comes in level 2.3% on a second look, but far more consumption, a tick up 4.2%. Critically, the GDP price index, Julia, let me give you this exactly. It was it's a wow statistic, 2.2% prior. The second look GDP is not 2.2%. It's such a lift. I wonder if it's a typo. We'll have to watch that. 4.2%. On a simplistic basis, you take a 2.3 and a 4.2, add them together, and you got a 6.5% nominal GDP. That's an amateur take, but that gives you the shock of this GDP price index statistic. From the survey was 2.2%, and it's a true jump condition to 4.2%. Durable goods right now, I'm going to say with a lift as well. An X-aircraft, what Julia Pollak looks at, is again sprightly. 0.3 is larger, 0.8. And on claims, we finally get the weakness here. 221 comes in at 242. So it's market moving. Equities don't do much, but I'm going to go down here. We've been talking all morning. The Sweeney yield actually churns at a 4.09%. The 10-year real yield comes in ever so slightly, 1.91%. Julia Pollak, I did the nominal GDP amateur take, but just to be safe here, do we still see a run rate of animal spirits in the nation of 5% plus?
Well, this is sort of interesting, isn't it? I mean, GDP is coming in lower than previously estimated and inflation higher. And that's consistent with the changes in the Fed's projections recently. And I think that is consistent with the shift in sentiment recently as well. The economy is still growing at a robust rate. I mean, people didn't expect 2% GDP growth now, given our demographic shifts.
Yeah.
So that's still fairly strong, but it's not as strong as we once thought. Employment growth also, we saw with those huge revisions, the big benchmark revisions, was not as strong in 2023 and 2024 as we initially thought. And inflation is proving more stubborn.
What's the character of inflation you see at ZipRecruiter?
So this is not wage-driven inflation for the most part. Productivity growth is strong, and employers, do have pretty substantial wage setting power, even though, yes, there are industries with labor shortages where employers are sort of boxed in. The issue here really is housing. That's the biggest source of inflation in the United States. And then, of course, energy goes up and down with geopolitical swings. So housing is the big one, though. And the Fed has proven somewhat ineffective at dealing with it because when the Fed raises interest rates, we see inventories shrink. And so prices remain high and price growth remains strong.
Julia, thank you so much, particularly during this economic data. Really, really appreciate it this morning. Again, I'm watching carefully the GDP price index. It is a really large, well, there it is. It's changed. It's 2.2%, and now it's 2.4%. So it came in a lift there. It's a lift. That's all I want to say. Maybe I misread that earlier, but nevertheless, the GDP price index 2.4% is far more normal, and that gets you out to 5%.
Yep.
4.7% nominal GDP. Our economic indicators are brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio. Small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technologies. So the economic data pretty much on durable goods, a nice lift. I mean, that's the positive thing. The Boeing, cap goods ex-Boeing.
Yep. Ex-Boeing, right? And but the initial jobless claims kind of gets your attention, and I guess that makes sense with some of what's happening down in Washington, D.C. The initial jobless claims came in at 242,000 versus consensus 221.
The VIX under 18, 17.98. Futures up 30. NASDAQ up 0.7%. On YouTube, Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. All right, we've got futures advancing. This is after more economic data. Fourth quarter GDP in line with estimates, 2.3%. Personal consumption, a tick higher than expected, 4.2%. We have GDP price index up slightly, 2.4%. A bigger lift for durable goods, up 3.1%. Now we go to initial jobless claims, higher than expected. In fact, it's the highest level so far this year. 242,000 applications filed last week. At 10 a.m. Wall Street time, we get pending home sales. So we go to NASDAQ futures up 0.8%, 171 points. S&P futures up 0.5%, and Dow futures up 0.1%. The 2-year yield, 4.10%, and that's up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 3 basis points. And we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index now up 0.2%. Checking with shares of Nvidia after it showed that spending on its chips continues to grow. It's up more than 2%. Then we go to shares of software maker Snowflake, up 12%. Its product revenue forecast beat. It said a lot about its recently launched products for artificial intelligence. On the flip side, you have shares of Salesforce. They're down 3%, weaker than expected revenue. Investors had these higher hopes for its new AI product. And speaking of AI, sources say AI cloud firm CoreWeave, it could file publicly for a $4 billion U.S. IPO within a week. That's a startup. It's backed by Cisco and Nvidia. That would target a valuation of more than $35 billion. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. We say good morning to you across the nation on your commute on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Particularly good morning to those in the lovely traffic of Houston, Texas.
That's a traffic jam just waiting to happen.
I mean, it's like, it's like the can of worms in Rochester. It's like one big mess. This is a joy. Mr. Hines, and he was Mr. Hines, came out of Purdue Engineering a zillion years ago and started a one-man real estate shop in Houston, which became definitive in the development of real estate in America. Gerald Hines, we lost at 95 years old a few years back, but his firm persists. Joining us this morning from Houston in our studios, David Steinbach, Global CIO at Hines. Thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Surveillance. The basic idea we have is within 4 miles of Paul Sweeney's house, real estate is booming, and the rest of the country's terrible. Take us away from that myth. How is the nation doing in rents, commercial and private?
So from a 4 mile radius, yeah. So you know, it is interesting to see the real estate cycle play out. I do think people forget that the public markets and private markets are in very different places, and the private markets, especially in real estate, are coming off quite a run with interest rates going up 500 basis points. I mean, this has been one of the hardest, deepest cycles down this industry's had in a long time. And now it feels as though the worst is behind. I think the bottom was sometime last year, and we're at a repricing moment that is only happens a few times, you know, in a career, if you will. And so it is a significant buy opportunity right now in real estate, and so we're focused right now on taking advantage of that.
Housing, residential housing. I read that we have a housing shortage in this country. A, how did we get there? And B, how do we get out of it?
It is interesting. You know, in 2008, the last significant downturn we had overstock.
Okay.
And this time we are about 2 million houses short. I will say it's a global problem too. We're about 6 million houses short in most of the Western economies that we cover.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of reasons. I think regulation. I think there's been it's difficult. It's been difficult to build. Cost of capital has gone up with what the Fed has done and other central banks, and so that's all just created headwinds, making development harder.
I look at real estate right now, and the parsing that we see in New York is Class A, Class B, Class C, et cetera. You've had some recent successful Class A properties. I think of One Vanderbilt here in New York. Wow. This is one example as well. How do you make Class B and C financially reasonable after somebody takes an equity loss?
Well, let me first address it. There is a huge bifurcation happening. I mean, the best are doing quite well. As you mentioned, I'm from Houston, and we delivered a building during COVID, brand new office building in Houston. It's today fully leased at some of the highest rents Houston has seen. And so it's actually doing quite well. And I think even as now as some employers are looking to get tighter on cost, there's still this consolidation happening for the best of the best. With that said, there's a big gap. And the B and C projects, there's going to be a lot of pain in the system there for that.
Okay, but come on, Heinz has been doing this since time began. What do? Bulldoze them? Well, I mean, in a third world country, they blow them up and they all come down, and I don't know what they do.
Well, I mean,
what do we do?
Yeah, there is a similar playbook to retail. Looking, 15 years ago, it started. The e-commerce wave began, and we were looking down at retail as a lot needed to go away, and it did. It got repurposed. The malls got repurposed. Some just got torn down. I think there'll be repurposing. So.
All right. Let's say I'm in Houston. You told me off air that 100,000 people are going to come into Houston in the next year. I want to build some housing for that. I want to build like a community or whatever. Where do I get the funding for that? Do I go to my local Houston bank? Are they going to loan me money to build real estate? There
is I think a very interesting opportunity emerging not only in Texas but around the country in the banking. I think private credit is going to be filling a gap in the lending stack, and I think you're going to see that and play itself out in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, we got to get one more question in here, and that is, it's away from your remit, but is institutional money crowding out individual investment in homes, apartments, condos? To take the stereotype, good morning, John Gray, is Blackstone buying up all the real estate in America, lifting rents so I can't afford the next 2-bedroom house outside Kansas City?
I think you have to zoom out and look at how large and fragmented the real estate market is. We're talking a multi-trillion-dollar pool of money, and as big as Blackstone, whoever group are, it's small relative to the total pie. So.
One final question. It's the only reason we had you in. What is the loss in Houston from Bregman going to the Red Sox? I mean, how does Houston recover? It's the only reason you're sitting here. I'm just loving Bregman at third base for the Red Sox.
Yeah, somehow, some way.
Somehow, some way. Usually it's pitchers I've never heard of, and Houston always wins. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. David Steinbach with Heinz of Houston today, the global CIO. We'll do that again. That was I've never. Elisa, have you been to Houston?
I have. Yes.
I've never been to Houston.
You haven't. You have to go and experience it. I know because
I know in August, 98 degrees, right?
Yeah,
okay.
But my family are big Cowboys fans. So.
With our news in New York City, Michael Black.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. An Israeli official says the military will not withdraw from a strategic corridor in the Gaza Strip. The pullout was part of the ceasefire, and Israel's refusal could spark a crisis with Hamas and key mediator Egypt at a sensitive moment for the fragile truce. The official says Israeli forces need to remain to prevent weapons smuggling. The official spoke hours after Hamas released the remains of 4 hostages in exchange for over 600 Palestinian prisoners, the last planned exchange of the ceasefire's first phase, which ends this weekend. Authorities say Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman, his wife, and their dog were found dead in their New Mexico home. Foul play is not suspected. However, the Santa Fe County Sheriff Department says that they did not release any details of the circumstances of their mysterious deaths and say an investigation is ongoing. Hackman was one of the industry's most respected and honored performers. His dozens of films included the Oscar-winning role in The French Connection. He was honored for Unforgiven, and he had a breakout performance in Bonnie and Clyde. Gene Hackman was 95. In Lubbock, Texas, local doctors addressed the death of a child in more than 130 confirmed cases in the state. Dr. Laura Johnson, chief medical officer at Covenant Health Systems, said measles can spread quickly among unvaccinated people.
We know if you're in a room with someone with active contagious measles, you have about a 90% chance of contracting that illness if you are not immune.
All of the patients treated at Covenant, including the child who died, were not vaccinated. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
1967. Michael Barr, thank you so much. I could not go see Bonnie and Clyde. My parents had this vicious fight. It was hugely controversial.
Pretty violent for the
George
day.
Kennedy took the award for Cool Hand Luke.
Great
and this guy named Hackman, no one had ever heard of, stole Bonnie and Clyde. Just go watch it if you've never seen it. Bonnie and Clyde, Gene Hackman. From New York City, this is Bloomberg's Surveillance.
You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning across the nation. Good morning on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Just like that, the markets change the headline. The president, Mexico, Canada tariffs to go into effect March 4th. March 4, which essentially is tomorrow. The market evaporates. We're up 38, I'll say, maybe up 35. Futures now up 10. Got red and green on the screen. Small caps, red Russell. Dow, red fractionally as well. Bond market, I don't see a big adjustment yet, but it'll be interesting to see. I got there they go. I got a 10-year yield, 1.91%. The real yield, 1.91%. Watching all this is Jessica Minton. She joins us. It was too many Texas A&M people back to back.
I know.
With David Steinberg, I expect the ghost of Gil Luria to come through.
Exactly. They have a secret handshake or something. I'm not sure.
You know, exactly. They do have a secret handshake. And Hullabaloo, Canuck. Okay. What do you do with an equity market beholden to Trump headlines?
Well, right now, if you're looking at particularly in the auto space, so Ford, GM, Stellantis, all turning
lower here after the back of the news that we just heard. So obviously we're talking about what we're hearing with these taking into effect when you're thinking about these tariffs on March 4th. That's also the same day that President Trump will be speaking to the nation. Typically it would be called State of the Union, but because it's its first year of the presidency.
Oh, so he's timing the tariff to the State of the Union.
Exactly.
Okay,
so I think technically it's not called State of the Union this time,
Right.
but basically it's the
State of the
address
Union.
exactly
So the
that
joint
he'll be
session of Congress,
speaking.
okay.
So clearly seeing auto stocks making another move lower here on the back of this.
Is it good to be a stock picker today?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up since I wrote about this for my Taking
course
Stock
you do.
column this week. And this is something we've been watching closely because not surprisingly, not even just in recent years, but over the last decade, you've seen active managers underperform their benchmarks relative to the S&P 500. So I pulled some data from Morningstar Direct that looks at how over the last decade, active managers were underperforming their benchmarks, and then they only about 17% beat them in that span. But actually this year, and more specifically because they're so underweight when you're thinking about Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia, that's basically data from Morgan Stanley that's looking just how extreme that spread is since they started collecting the data since 2008. And actually active managers are outperforming their benchmarks by actually about close to 50%. And that compares to maybe around 38% at the same point a year ago. And that's just because they're so underweight, those tech giants.
They're underweight the
right.
tech giants.
So they're
Really?
under-owned, and they have to be for a variety of reasons.
That's what we just have one more question here. How do you measure exuberance? She's there. It's like 6 PhDs in a row with Jess. I mean, they got 8 terminals. How do you measure exuberance?
There's different ways, especially when it comes to consumer confidence and consumer sentiment. But on Thursdays, we get the AAII survey. And I like to look at this because this is investor sentiment. And there's also a bullish to bearish spread that we pull on the equities team. So right now, it's hovering around the lowest since 2022. So that would have been in the height of, obviously, when the Federal Reserve began hiking interest rates aggressively to try to tame the highest inflation that we'd seen in about a generation. But pulling that back even further, that's also hovering around the lowest level since March 2009 here. So you are seeing actually that spread there lower for 4 consecutive weeks. But then if you look at other corners of the market with retail sentiment specifically, that's still at all-time highs. So you're seeing more of the speculative corners like hedge funds being more bearish right now versus retail still pretty extreme optimism.
I mean, last time you were in, we were talking ZZ Top and Dusty Baker, of course, at College Station. Paul, explain to young Manton, Southside Johnny. Explain Southside Johnny and the clubs of New Jersey pre-Springsteen.
The Stone Pony down there in Asbury Park, it's still there. They still rock it out, and they have a huge area in the summer, so they have outdoor concerts. Southside Johnny, Bruce Springsteen, Steve Van Zandt, the whole gang of them in that kind of late 60s, early 70s.
I would say 70, 71.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can't say how far ahead of their time they were.
You know, they were
shocking.
They were outside of New York City, but they were close enough to New York City that they got a lot of good bands down there.
We're doing too much here. What's the name of the place with God's Basement?
The Parker House.
The Parker.
Sure.
Could you see Jess
March
Menton? Jess Menton and Lisa Mateo at the Parker House this summer?
I will have cocktails with Lisa Mateo and her family this summer at the Parker House.
I'll bet you Jess Menton would wear Lily Pulitzer. Good morning from New York.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
The president wants lower interest rates from Chairman Powell.
You can make the argument that this is a really rich market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
President Trump signing a wide range of executive orders.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Thank you for being with us on your commute across this nation. Good morning around the world on the digital Apple CarPlay. I'm seeing it more and more. Android Auto, I'm seeing it more and more. Everybody's getting these fancy cars. You got one. It's like you're flying a plane or something.
It is. I mean,
it's all tech.
Got the new Beamer, and I feel like it's an iPad. It's an iPhone with 4 wheels, you know? That's how we go.
We go now to our tariff analysis. Would you be selecting a new Beamer if it had a 25% tariff on it?
No way, man. So we'll have to see. But March 4th, it looks like from the president's tweet, tariffs are going into effect. I think my BMW was actually built in Tennessee or Alabama or something. I don't know. So
really?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's good to know. I mean, March 4th, State of the Union. Look for our coverage there. Katie Lyons, Joe Matthew, with a lot of good coverage on March 4th, the State of the Union. And again, these tariffs. Front and center. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. We're brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, they focus on the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing, wealth management, capital markets, investment banking. We thank Oppenheimer for their support here. Greatly thank that this morning. Futures up 35, down they go, like up 18 off the Trump headline, and they're coming back a little bit here right now. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And leading the pack this morning, our NASDAQ futures. This is after Nvidia said it bought $11 billion of revenue from its new Blackwell AI chips. Nvidia shares, they're up about 2%. We also got more economic data this morning. GDP increase and unrevised 2.3% annualized pace in the fourth quarter. Consumer spending advance of 4.2% pace. And the core PCE price index, that climbed 2.7%. That was faster than the 2.5% initially reported. Tomorrow, we get the January PCE report. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, S&P futures up 0.3%, Dow futures, they are little changed. We have the 2-year yield 4.09%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 3 basis points. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising higher, up 0.4%. To earnings, media companies learning that gains in streaming, well, they can't seem to offset those declines in traditional TV. We heard it from Warner Brothers this morning, but not seeming to worry investors because shares are up on the rise, up about 5%. And then after the close yesterday, we heard a similar story from Paramount Global, but its shares down 1%. Finally, eBay shares falling down 9%. Sales of the current quarter missed estimates. Soft demand in Germany and the UK. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it this morning. He's the D.A. Davidson. And in charge of all of institutional research. Gil Luria joins us this morning. It's on tech and on Nvidia and all the rest of it. Gil, you follow 30 companies. You got a very measured outlook, 14 buys, 16 holds off the Bloomberg this morning. What is the character of your enthusiasm on Nvidia given 14 buys, 16 holds, 0 sells?
Balanced view of Nvidia. They're doing very well and they're set up to do well this year, but this may be as good as it gets for Nvidia. Their big customers have increased spend the most into the fourth quarter of last year. They're probably going to start moderating the growth and spend this year.
Right.
So this may be as good as it gets for Nvidia.
Off the screen, you got a neutral on Nvidia, neutral on Salesforce, neutral on Zoom. I'm loving this. Neutral on Five9. Away we go. What's a neutral? Should I hold the stock? Do I want to find something else to do? What does a neutral mean, Gil Luria?
That there's better things to do. So if we were to look, last night was a great view of what the AI trade is, right? Nvidia was the AI trade a couple of years ago and last year. Salesforce is not quite ready for AI. Snowflake was a fantastic report. Infrastructure software is incredibly important. For companies to be able to run AI applications, they need to get their data ready. And Snowflake is leading the way in terms of doing that. They have the main analytical database, the leading product. And so companies are using them to put all the data in one place so they can even start building AI applications. That's why Snowflake did well. That's why we like infrastructure software companies like Snowflake, Datadog, Dynatrace, JFrog. We like half the companies. We just prefer them over the other half.
All these names, the Detroit Lions Blue Light, all these names, is it like 2000 Redux?
Yes,
it sounds
exactly.
like a Super Bowl list from 2000.
Exactly right. Hey, Gil, we just had President Trump put out a tweet saying that these tariffs are going into place, including China here. How does the tech world view a world of increasing tariffs?
Well, it depends on if you're selling hard goods or if you're selling software. If you're selling hardware, let's say Nvidia, this makes your life a little bit more complicated. Higher tariff borders between the U.S. and China, between China and Taiwan, between Taiwan and where they source their materials. All those types of tariffs will add up to make the product more expensive. For the software companies and the internet companies, it'll be more subtle. Let's not forget, part of the reason we're talking about putting tariffs on Europe is that the Europeans have made a habit of charging our big technology companies billions of dollars at a time as quote unquote penalties for whatever behavior they choose to penalize. So as we escalate with Europe, those companies may suffer more. As we escalate with China, Apple may get in the crosshairs again. So it could have an impact, but it really depends on how much follow through there is in terms of tariffs and how combative our adversaries are going to be once we do raise tariffs.
So if you're a Microsoft, how much attention are you paying to what's happening in Washington, D.C. with tariffs?
A lot of attention, again, especially as it has to do with Europe. Again, the Europeans have fined Microsoft many times, have extracted their penalties and fees out of Microsoft, and they'll go right back to that well if they decide that's a good way to retaliate against tariffs that we put on European cars, perhaps. So for all these companies, they're paying a lot of attention because on many of these frontiers, they are right in the crosshairs of retaliation.
So in the 11 o'clock hour, Gil, Caroline Hyde of Bloomberg Television is going to be interviewing Mr. Jassy from Amazon. What do you need to hear from Mr. Jassy in the days and weeks to come at Amazon? Because I know that's one of the names you have a buy rating on.
Yeah, so the progress they're making across the board is very impressive. It's our favorite mega cap pick because they're leading the way in terms of facilitating enterprise AI. Because AWS is the biggest hyperscaler, they're also going to have the biggest AI business there. On the consumer side, they introduced Alexa Plus yesterday. They have Rufus on the shopping app. So they're helping consumers shop through better and better AI tools. And then on the retail business, they're doing well as the US consumer holds up. The European consumer could possibly pick up, and all these things feed into each other. The advertising business is getting better with AI, with more volume. So that flywheel is working pretty well for Amazon right now.
How is their box business? Nobody, fancy people like you, Gil, you never talk about, you get a cardboard box, or you know, do you like the new foam ones, Paul? The little things you need.
Yeah, it's all right.
You know, what do you think, Gil? I mean, is the box business going to put the U.S. Post Office, FedEx, and everybody else out of business?
The UPS and FedEx a few years ago, when Amazon came to them, before it started doing its own delivery and asked them for price concessions, and they said no, and boy, do they regret it. Because now Amazon's already surpassed UPS and will soon make those two companies smaller and smaller. They're making the U.S. Postal Service smaller. I know the Amazon trucks at my house at least 2 or 3 times a day.
I mean, it's great here, but one of the things, with Gil Luria, DA Davidson folks, we can do this because a really holistic view on securities research. We were talking earlier to Caroline Hyde. She swears they still got 1-day delivery in the United Kingdom. Granted, it's teensy weens. I mean, the distance from Caroline Hyde to John Farrow's house in England is like 42 miles. But is 1-day delivery gone? That was an experiment, Gil Luria, of years ago. Have they just given that up quietly so they can profit?
No, it's quite the contrary. Delivery times are still getting shorter, and they are absolutely relentless about it. They are constantly adding more fulfillment centers, last mile operations. They're still talking about using drones. They are going to be relentless about shortening delivery times, and while keeping the delivery costs lower. They're investing billions of dollars in it, and they're not going to stop until we get everything we want the same day.
We go to surveillance. How many boxes are at the front door? Correspondent Lisa Mateo. Lisa, I don't buy it. I don't see one-day delivery anymore at Amazon. Do you?
I get a same day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe it's just where I live. It could be Manhattan.
I mean,
in a couple hours.
Yeah, you make a phone call when you're doing your morning, running around doing your morning chores. By the time you get back home in the afternoon,
I don't have
boom,
that.
right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Mayor Adams' fault. We'll talk to him about that.
What's the Upper East Side things?
Continue with Gil Luria. I'm on 4-day delivery.
It's a whole Third Avenue taken over, as John Tucker always reports to us. Apple, Gil, you have a buy rating on Apple. If I'm Apple, I still have to worry about China. I get 20% of my revenue from China. Despite what I'm trying to do in friendshoring and onshoring, my supply chain is completely tied to China here. How can I buy Apple stock if I've got that China risk still hanging over me?
Yeah, China is the big risk. It's the most competitive market. It's the most dynamic market. And again, it gets ensnared in the U.S.-China trade dispute. So it is a risk. It's down to 15%. It may go down to even less of Apple's revenue going forward. And at the same time, Apple's investing in the next big market, which is India. And they're hoping to get, over the next 20, 30 years, the same type of growth they've gotten out of China over the last 20 years, because China's not going to be supportive of the growth story on the product side. And then to your point, it's also a challenge in terms of the supply chain. Apple has diversified away from China largely, but again, with the higher tariffs, any goods and service, any goods that get shipped anywhere in the world are going to be at risk of having higher costs.
All right, so stepping back, Gil, looking across all your coverage, and again, you covered 30 some odd names in broad tech. Have we seen peak AI?
That's come up a couple times today.
Yeah.
It's an important
question.
Not
at all. Yeah. Not at all. We're just getting started. AI is going to make all of us more productive. It's going to be a contributor to GDP growth. It's just not going to happen overnight. There's going to be different waves of benefit. Again, the last wave was Microsoft and Nvidia. Now the wave is infrastructure software. Again, I highlighted Snowflake, but there's others. And then in 2 or 3 years, there's going to be a wave of applications that take off and drive a lot of activity there, including through the Apple ecosystem, which will make the iPhone more valuable. Eventually, it'll become so big that it'll make all of us more productive. We'll all have personal assistants that can help us at work, that can help with our personal lives. This future is coming. It's just not going to happen overnight. And unfortunately, we've had some companies raise expectations as if it's imminent, when in fact it'll take a few more years before we see it in everyday life all the time.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. I mean, that was a very nice summary, Gil Luria. That's why we're having you on here. But where's the proof of concept? I mean, give me one infrastructure thing in the New York tri-state area. I mean, is AI helping them land airplanes at EWR? Is AI helping with the building of the many tunnels under the Hudson River, the Sweeney tunnels we're calling? Though, I mean, where, Gil Luria, is the first proof of concept of AI doing that?
Software code. Software engineers were, if you look 2-3 years ago, were in such short supply that the main reason we didn't have advances in software is we didn't have enough software engineers. What's happening now is generative AI is actually perfectly suited for software because it's a language that's easy to understand and easy to translate to. And so we're having an explosion of software code development. It's going to take a couple of years before we see the results of it, but it's already starting to happen. And those are the infrastructure software companies that we're talking about. Again, names like GitLab and JFrog are helping develop more code. Snowflake is helping store these new applications. That's already happening. That's why those companies are doing better than other software companies right now. But it's going to take time before we see it in our everyday life. For now, we just have chatbots and Alexa Plus ordering paper towels when you ask it to.
Don't be a stranger. This was really informative. Thank you so much. Gil Luria, with a nice mix of buys and neutrals. We like to see that on the sell side. He's with DA Davidson.
I mean, I don't know if I want to be more productive. I'm kind of happy with the way things are right now.
Oh, you need a person. Can you see Michael Barr with a personal assistant?
Oh, yes, totally. With his posse.
It's called a dog. That's what it is.
With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The Supreme Court is allowing President Trump's freeze on foreign aid to stay in effect for now. Chief Justice John Roberts is giving humanitarian groups who've challenged the freeze until noon tomorrow to respond. Brown University political scientist Wendy Schiller says this is just one constitutional clash that's headed for the high court.
This is a real moment for Roberts, who's had a number of these really important moments, the immunity decision, obviously, but even going back to Obamacare, affirming Obamacare as a program, but then also limiting the federal government's power to be coercive in how it distributes money. And that's this balancing act that Roberts is facing, I think, right now.
Wendy Schiller of Brown University spoke on Bloomberg Surveillance. President Trump says proposed tariffs on Canada, Mexico will go into effect on March 4th. Trump on Truth Social also says China will likewise be charged an additional 10% tariff on that date. The president says the April 2nd reciprocal tariff date will remain in full force. New Mexico authorities are investigating the mysterious deaths of two-time Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman, his wife, and their dog. They were found dead at their home in Santa Fe. A cause of death has not been provided, but police say foul play is not suspected. Hackman was known for several movie roles, including as Reverend Scott in 1972's The Poseidon Adventure.
How many more lives? That wasn't enough. Acres wasn't. Now this girl. You want another life? Then take me.
Gene Hackman was 95. An Israeli official says the military will not withdraw from a strategic corridor in the Gaza Strip. The pullout was part of the ceasefire, and Israel's refusal could spark a crisis with Hamas and key mediator Egypt at a sensitive moment for the fragile truce. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
No one will dance with me. I think it's this dress. I told them white would make me look fat. Senator Keeley, the birdcage. And this is Gene Hackman. Watch it 6, 7, 8 times. Mike Nichols saved that project single-handedly.
Yes.
The birdcage, Robin Williams, never would have happened without the genius and persistence of Mike Nichols. It was just, he saved it.
This is a quick trivia thing about Gene Hackman and the French Connection. Now, anybody remembers the car chase scene? That crash actually happened in New York. That was not scripted, but they kept it going anyway.
Right.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was not scripted.
That was real New York.
They kept it
And
in
you
there.
mentioned Mississippi Burning earlier this morning.
Great.
Tell us about that.
Just a great one. William Dafoe, and Hackman played an FBI agent going down there with the civil rights issues in the 60s, and just a great role. He had the accent down, had the whole Southern boy thing down, but boy, he was tough in that role too. So that was fun.
For those younger that haven't seen Bonnie and Clyde, I can't say the societal uproar in 1967 over the violence of it. Now it seems tame. Now it's like, wait, why was there upset?
Well, even when
he steals it.
It was, I saw the TV version of it, which was totally watered down, and then I actually saw the movie. Yeah. And like you said, it's like it's still kind of tame, but I get where the violence part was coming.
You're literally in the movie, Beatty, who put the whole thing together, is looking at Hackman going, oh, so this is how you do it.
Faye Dunaway, wow.
Is his brother, Clyde Barrow, Buck Barrow is as well. We got to do a data check here as we remember Gene Hackman, all of us with our personal memories. Thank you out on YouTube for those comments, Mr. Hackman. Futures up 25, red and green in the screen. But, Paul, I'm going to call it, given the Trump headline on March 4th tariffs, pretty resilient tape.
Pretty resilient tape. A little air came out of the balloon a little bit there with those tweets about it. But, again, still hanging right in there. We got the NASDAQ up 0.8%, so some strong tech.
The real yield, 1.91%.
And your VIX, Tom, it's right back to 18.
Yeah, it's come back a little bit. It was 17 and change. It's it's a churn here off the headline. The uncertainty of the tariffs. Again, Bloomberg with full coverage of that on Balance of Power. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report sponsored by IBKR. Will the average U.S. temperature in February 2025 exceed 36 degrees Fahrenheit? An IBKR forecast trader, the yes recently at 44%. What's your take? You can trade your prediction at ibkr.com/forecast. All right, we've got a mixed look on the screen right now. This is after economic data. It showed the U.S. economy advance at a pretty healthy pace and inflation a bit more stubborn than initially thought at the end of 2024. We'll start with NASDAQ futures up 0.8%, S&P futures up 0.4%. But Dow futures taking a turn right now, little change, down about 4 points. The 2-year yield, 4.10%. That's up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 3 basis points. Shares of Nvidia still higher after earnings. They're up more than 2% right now. Rolls-Royce up 17% in London. Resumed shareholder payouts after that 5-year break, and it raised its earnings forecast. And finally, peanut butter and jelly maker J.M. Smucker raised its full-year outlook. A big part of that, sales of its Uncrustables brand. That's right. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, you can subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Afterthought brought home a box of Uncrustables.
Oh, no.
What
the other day.
It's a jelly wrapped in dough, and they're sold in the freezer section. So kids take them, just pop them in the microwave, and there you go.
So it's like a
Instant
peanut
meal.
butter and jelly sandwich in a little pocket or something?
Yes, exactly.
There you go. All right.
Wikipedia has it as a sealed crustless sandwich.
Yes.
We go to surveillance nutrition expert Lisa Mateo on this.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Eric.
These are not in the Mateo
She's
house.
hoarding them, won't let me get near them.
They are not.
And they're one of the 4 food groups.
Yeah. But the kids have them all the time at all the games. They take them because they're easy.
Well, that's a good idea.
Parents don't have to cut the crust off like how they used to. They're just giving it to them.
They were introduced in 1995. Figures, Fargo, North Dakota. I think Lisa Bramwich had the first Uncrustable ever. There we are. Thank you. Thank you for that, Lisa. Anna Wong's going, why am I on? Joining us now here as we get to the market opening is Dr. Wong. Anna Wong, acclaimed at Bloomberg Economics. And I want to go interior in that there's lots of exterior headlines on international trade, tariffs, March 4th, etc. And yet I was trained to pay a lot of attention to domestic final sales. Carl Weinberg and Mary Chen at High Frequency Economics say, they came in pretty darn good. Are we slowing down under domestic final sales, or does that await all this tariff noise?
Right. So, Tom, you're right. This domestic final sales strip out the more volatile components, such as, trade. And right now, trade data could be quite noisy because in anticipation of tariffs, many firms had been front running the inventory restocking. And this is why in the last 2 months, we have seen very strong imports data. So stripping that out, the domestic final sales is running at about a pace of roughly 3%. And today we just got the the revisions, and it has been revised down a couple tenths of a percentage point, still strong. And partly that, mainly it's because of consumers. And at least recall that in the fourth quarter last year, the stock market was doing quite well. And I think the wealth effect from the stock market had kept consumption of the top 20% by wealth, the people who belong to that bucket, and they have been supporting aggregate consumption. But I think all that has changed coming into the year. That picture is now quite stale, and I think going forward, we could see more weakness down the line.
So, Anna, yesterday we had the first cabinet meeting for President Trump, and then we brought that live to Bloomberg Radio and Television. And one of the key aspects of it was the presence of Mr. Elon Musk, and he talking about the Doge efforts going along there. How and when will we see the effects of Doge, if we do, in, I don't know, U.S. employment, inflation data, GDP? How are you guys kind of modeling that?
We are already seeing it in the jobless claims data, and that's the first place you would expect to see it. So the jobless claims that we received an hour ago, there's a DC line state jobless claims, as well as the separate line items for federal employees. So the federal jobless claims have only increased very slightly, so you don't see it yet. And that data is also very much lagged. So we only have data from, almost 2 weeks ago, which is not where you would expect to see a spike. However, the DC jobless claims has spiked for 3 consistent weeks. And today we saw another spike. And what that's telling us is that whatever is happening to the government employees, which hasn't shown up in the direct government jobless claims yet, it's already spilling over to the private sector, and which includes employees who are affected by the funding freeze that Trump signed in as an executive order on day one. Actually, that is the biggest effect, not all the Doge stuff, but that is.
Well, let's come back to that. That's a really important distinction. It's almost like the distinction of the market opening, always with Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And after Nvidia earnings, more economic data. Let's see how we shape things up. We'll start with the S&P 500, up 0.4%, 25 points, 5,982. We have the Dow up 0.1%, 70 points, 43,498. The Nasdaq up 0.7%, 137 points at 19,212. We move to the 2-year yield, 4.11%. That's up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 4 basis points. We have spot gold lower, down nearly 1% at $2,890 an ounce. We have Brent crude up more than 1.5%, $73 a barrel. We move to the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, up 0.4% at the open. We're also checking in with Nvidia shares. They're up nearly 2%. And right now, yes, that is leading the Mag 7. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. One more question here with Dr. Wong here as we look at the labor economy, and of course, PCE tomorrow, an important item as well. Dr. Wong, you were talking there about in the news and Doge and all that. You're suggesting to us that so many of the economic dynamics now are away from Doge, right?
It's more due to things that people are not talking more about, which is the funding freeze and also the hiring freeze. The Doge does add to this marginal impact and the uncertainty of it. But for example, next Friday, we're going to get a payrolls report, and we are expecting it to be weak. And that weakness would be driven by the funding freeze affected layoffs rather than the direct Doge layoff of federal employees.
Okay, Anna Wong, thank you so much. Really looking for your team's coverage of this important inflation data that we see tomorrow. Dr. Wong driving forward our U.S. economics, and of course acclaimed worldwide for her work last year, particularly on the labor economy. Dow up 72 points. There's green on the screen right now. The VIX 18.25. Paul, quickly here, I got to go to WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery. I'd say it's a moonshot, but after the trauma, 25-7. But nevertheless, if it's at $12.
Yep.
And if it breaks out higher, it gets back to 2 years ago. It's sort of working. Is that the right analysis?
Sort of working. I mean, again, I think what the street likes is the fact that A, their streaming business is profitable, so that's good. And two, they added subscribers. That's good. But the key issue obviously remains for the Warner Brothers Discoveries, for the Paramounts of the world, maybe even for Fox Corporation, is do any of those companies have the scale to compete against Netflix and even the Walt Disney Company? So those questions are still open to interpretation. But again, if you're focusing on the streaming business, good stuff. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of content there in Warner Brothers. The question is, what's the best way to monetize it?
Huge follow through. Thank you out on YouTube. It's a very informed discussion today. We may get a record audience today. They call that peak audience.
Okay,
I was
very good.
Lectured yesterday by our YouTube committee. Joining us now, Uncrustables correspondent Lisa Mateo here. Smucker's has been fighting patent wars on this since time began. This is in Michigan.
Yeah.
They went after pasties. Now, in New Jersey, there's Rocky's Pasties.
Rocky's Pasties, okay. What is that?
Family owned, 1924, Wharton, New Jersey, 07885.
Okay.
And, Smucker's wanted to take this gloriosity of Smucker's peanut butter and jelly.
It's a genius idea. I mean...
and they wanted to block people from making some forms of sandwiches like it. And a lot of lawyers were employed on this over the years. Do you have lawyers at your house to keep them out of the house?
No. But you think about it. I mean, how much of a time saver it is for parents. You don't have to sit there, open the jar, slap the peanut. All you do is open the bag and hand it to the child. It's like a miracle maker.
J.M. Smucker Company, Orrville, Ohio, Tom, 9,000 employees, $11.2 billion of market cap. So it's J.M. Smucker. It's out there.
It's a going concern.
Yeah.
And it's there. But
Orrville, Ohio.
I had no idea the legal battle over Uncrustables.
No.
And they've been it's like a process that's patented. And
okay.
There you go.
We say good morning to Rocky's Pasties in New Jersey. I think road trips.
Sure, we could do that.
Get out there and see. Dow up 80 points. What am I looking at? The real yield, 1.92%. Actually does a little bit better, a little higher yield. Paul looks at oil under $70, West Texas Intermediate, 69.90. Caroline Hyde in Mr. Josie of Amazon at 11 a.m. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got stocks, getting a little Nvidia boost. NASDAQ up about 0.5%. Another check of shares of Nvidia because it showed spending on its chips continues to grow. Its shares right now, they are lower. They just dipped down about 1%. We got another check of stocks. So we go to the Dow, up 0.5%. The S&P 500 up 0.4%. We go to the 2-year yield, 4.10%, up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 3 basis points. The dollar actually rising. President Trump said 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico on track to take effect March 4th. So we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.5%. Some stocks on the move. We'll go to shares of software maker Snowflake. They're higher, up about 8%. It's launched its product revenue forecast. It beat. It said it had a lot about its recently launched products for artificial intelligence. So those products in the spotlight right now. Warner Brothers shares, they're up more than 8%. Streaming gains helped offset that decline in its TV networks. After the close, we'll hear from Dell, HP, and Monster Beverage, to name a few. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Is Monster Beverage like Celsius? That's another one I missed.
It's one of those, the energy drinks.
Again, none of that in the Mateo household.
No.
Okay.
So you have a monster beverage when you have your Uncrustables, right?
What a doozy.
Uh,
Right now I'm looking at the 4 3/8 of March of 2045, issued in 2015. This was the 30-year Uncrustable for J.M. Smucker. Joining us now, an expert on Uncrustable bonds, George Borey, Chief Investment Strategist, Fixed Income. Okay, this is a corporate piece from J.M. Smucker. At the peak, it was a 120. It's come down to 84, where it's been for 3 years. Can you just buy long duration stuff right now and know you're going to grab a coupon, in this case 4 3/8, and it'll work out over the coming 5 or 10 years?
I think that's a great question, Tom, and I think the simple answer is yes, you can. And I think
extend duration. Oh, that's stupid duration for a guy like you. Yeah. But if I'm living Uncrustables at home, I can go out to the 20-year.
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's a 20-year piece.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at you mentioned earlier on the show, you talked about real yields, and we sort of live and die on real yields in the world of bonds. So if I'm sort of earning, call it 4.5%, 5% interest, and inflation's clicking along at 2%, at 3%, this sort of the extra income is actually growing my purchasing power through time. It's been a long time since bonds can do that for you, and it's a little hard for people to get their head around it because we're thinking
it's
multiple
all brand new
years
for
out.
So many people.
But the real yield in bonds is anywhere from 190 basis points on treasuries up to 300, 400, 600 basis points in other parts of the market. That's a lot of income for a bond investor to just compound consistently through time.
And Paul, to close a loop on his piece, the real Uncrustable is when it's slightly toasted.
Oh, that's taking it to another level.
That's the real
taking it to another level.
Okay, let's go away from Smuckers and get serious.
How much credit risk are you taking out there today, George? Because again, as you mentioned, you can sit there in a 2-year treasury at, now it's 4.1%.
Yeah, I think you want to take some credit risk. I think that the important thing in today's bond market is really kind of diversify that duration. The Treasury has a lot of challenges as it relates to financing, the fundamentals, all sorts of kind of political considerations. And so moving away from treasuries into things like corporates, into high yield, into mortgage-backed securities, that makes a lot of sense to us. Even moving into municipal debt, so diversify away from the federal government, focus on the states. All of these things incrementally improve your bond portfolio. They improve the probability that yield and income is going to come to you kind of consistently, and takes away a little bit of the volatility that treasuries are sort of introducing into bond portfolios. So, to answer your question, we like corporates, we like a certain amount of corporates, but as we've talked about many times on this show and other forums, credit spreads, the difference between corporate yields and treasury yields, are fairly tight. So you get about 80 basis points of extra income going from treasuries into investment grade corporates. That's not a sort of a cheap valuation by any stretch. But it is still okay. And as you mentioned on the show, the economics still look pretty good. The data looks okay. Growth is sort of perhaps decelerating modestly, but not terribly so. And inflation might be ticking up a bit. All of that mix suggests that corporate credit is not a bad spot to be, and take the extra 80 basis points and run.
So how do you guys deal with, or maybe you don't deal with, all the noise coming out of Washington, D.C. as it relates to tariffs and immigration and things like that may have an impact on this economy? How do you guys play that?
Well, I'd say one of the founding principles, one of the cornerstone considerations in the world of all-spring fixed income is we invest from the bottom up. You want to pick good bonds. And so when you have big macro considerations like we're talking about today, some big changes at the federal level, you sort of want to de-emphasize the macro risk. That means just bond prices up, bond prices down. Try to de-emphasize that and really focus on the granularity of a bond portfolio, picking good credits, identifying good sectors. As I mentioned before, diversifying that duration so that you're not wed to just one position in the portfolio. the whole argument of hit singles, not homers, use a baseball analogy, rings very, very true in today's market. And those basic principles, those very basic bond principles, work to your advantage. I learned very early in my career as a bond investor, you're only as good as the bonds in your portfolio. You can buy the market. The market is not a great portfolio. You can create a much better portfolio by sub-selecting certain bonds that have characteristics that match to your objectives.
George Bory with us with Allspring Global Investments right now with a lot of really intelligent discussion here. I look at the great moderation and, you get through COVID and all that. And, here's something nobody ever talks about. Microsoft, 3.5 out 17 years. And it's trading at a huge discount. I get that. The yield right now is 4.750 to maturity. In the old days, Pim Fox and I would sit with a beverage of our choice, and we'd have the Blue Book, which was the Standard & Poor's corporate Blue Book. Like this, folks, on YouTube. You go like this. Dip your finger in a martini and, and move the pages to find the Boise Cascade, just like Grandpa. Pim Fox and I would do this for hours. Can we get back to that with this new yield structure where people listening and watching can go, I want to buy a corporate bond? Can we get back to those days?
Well, I think you can go back to parts of it. I think certainly selecting individual bonds makes a lot of sense, and that's what we do day in and day out. The market's much more efficient these days. A lot of electronic trading, ETFs make it very easy, and index replication is a very achievable type of strategy. But you have to ask yourself a question like, do I want to own the whole market? And sometimes that can make sense for some investors, but for many, as you mentioned, Tom, holding a sub-selection, a few individual bonds that kind of map very specifically to your liabilities or your saving strategy or your investment portfolio makes tremendous sense. And in today's world, we have a wide range of prices. We have some bonds that are trading at deep discounts. Those bonds will accrete to par as we move through time. There are still some bonds out there with some very nice coupons. And as I mentioned before, like the credit worthiness. What I like to say is there are a lot of entities out there that are on the right side of inflation. That can work for the issuer of the bond.
Get one more in here, Paul. We're running out of time.
Just real quickly, inflation at starting to rear its ugly head, at least in discussions among some investors here as we think about some of the economic policies. What's it mean for a bond investor?
So I think for a bond investor, I think you should be cautious on long bonds. I think that the term premium in the market does seem a bit low, and it does feel as if there's some upward pressure kind of coming down the pipe. I don't think this is kind of runaway inflation, but it does suggest that bond yields, fair value for the 10 years, probably closer to 5% than it is to 4%. And today we're at, call it 4.30. So there is some upward potential, kind of in bond yields, we think, over the course of this year.
George, thank you so much. George was brilliant. Chief Investment Strategist with Allspring Global Investments. George Bory with us. And this is the markets on the move. I just got a 1.89 print
on your real
on a 10-year real yield. Equities give way a little bit. Dow's up 200 points, but I got red and green on the screen when I look at a red NASDAQ as well. And the VIX can't make up its mind. We go, 18, 17, better number. Now we balloon out 18.81%. I just got to believe it's like the distractions that we're getting out of Washington. I mean, again, with these tariffs coming in March 4th, that is an announcement of the president. This would be the State of the Union address coming up. BitDog was up 87,000, now back to 85,000. So there's some movement here in the market, a reason to stay with us through the 10 o'clock, the 11 o'clock hour into that important interview. Caroline Hyde in the leadership of Amazon. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney. Paul Sweeney waiting for a conversation. Caroline Hyde with Mr. Josie. Is it Josie? Is that right?
Jesse.
Jesse. Okay.
Amazon.
Jesse of Amazon. We'll do that. And then do you have Prime Minister Starmer, or is that later in the day?
I think that's going to be later in the day.
Later in the
day. That might be a
2 p.m. Thank you. The press conference scheduled 2 p.m. An eventful day, to say the least. Quickly here on YouTube live chat, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Roger nails it. George Borey made bonds somewhat understandable.
Oh, there you go.
That's the live chat of the day. George Borey is exquisite at Allspring. It's hard. I mean, you try to do yield to maturity at CFA level 0.5. You're like, what?
Yep.
Because it's iterative math. Speaking of iterative mathematics, joining us now, mathematician David Gura. He's talk about a three-eye. I mean, they're going up in space for 11 minutes. Gail King and Katy Perry.
Right.
You were gone for 11 days.
I did. We went to Hawaii.
You're tanned and
South
rested.
Pacific.
What?
I did get tan. We were at the on Oahu. It was a long flight with the kids, but we made it.
You're drunk.
We got Florida like a few hours away.
I know, but it was nice to be removed.
Did you serve Bloody Marys to the kids?
No Bloody Marys to the kids. I did have Mai Tais at the Hulukalani in Honolulu, so I sampled the local fare, and I did miss you, Tom.
Very good.
It was nice to get away.
Open question here. I saw you with Dana Bash the other day on CNN, and you know what you're doing with Steph, and you're out and about.
Yeah.
Open question. What are the pros like you focused on in the coming tariff wars?
Well, there's so much ambiguity and confusion. So you've been living this morning. Yesterday, we had these comments from the president that he was going to hold off on these tariffs for a month. And then, lo and behold, a few minutes ago, he's indicating they're going to go into place in the coming week. And there's going to be additional 10% tariff on China now, bringing that up. So it's not only the timing, which, of course, is a huge issue for the market and for the countries involved, but it's the quantity of these tariffs and how they respond. And so today we've got Keir Starmer coming to Washington. How he responds to this latest salvo. I mean, the dance was going to be delicate already, but this certainly is going to make him approach the president with even more caution, I think.
We had a cabinet meeting yesterday.
Yes.
What did you take away from that?
I wasn't there, but I understand you didn't have to be in the cabinet to be there.
Yes.
I was surprised at how much Elon Musk was speaking at that meeting, but I think it shows how large a role he plays. I mean, the illustrative moment for me was when there was a question about are there members of the cabinet who are upset or displeased with the role that Elon Musk is playing, and the president quickly took over and asked the cabinet if anybody felt that way, and then there was kind of tepid applause for Elon Musk. So we see firsthand in that meeting, that first meeting, the kind of unease or strangeness or novelty or newness of the cabinet having to interface with Elon Musk in the way that they have been.
Chief Justice John Roberts is allowing the freeze on foreign aid to remain for now. Wendy Schiller from Brown University earlier today told me I should pay attention to that. I'm not really sure why. Why do you think we should pay attention to that?
So this is a temporary stay, and the court wants to learn more about how this aid was frozen and what that means. But I think it's the first time we've seen the Supreme Court get involved in the initiatives that DOJ has been promoting here. And stepping back a little bit, this has been the prism through which we've learned the most about what Elon Musk is doing, what this department is doing. I think that of 100 court cases brought in federal court over the last month, 80 of them have had to do with DOJ and cost cutting in some way. So obviously it's the highest court in the land. That's something that stands out because of that. But again, I think it's the role of courts here in policing this that's going to be a story that continues into the next month.
Wild card question, which we can do with Mr. Gura. Where does Steve Bannon figure into this?
I hadn't heard his name.
I heard Steve Bannon at CPAC, and it's interesting. He has a lot of animus for these tech titans. He doesn't like what they stand for, but he approves of what Elon Musk is doing. He's somebody who, for a long time, has espoused the need for there to be significant cuts to the government budget, and he says that he backs Elon Musk in doing that. Where he draws a distinction between himself and these tech barons is that he thinks that they have designs on kind of post-humanity and moving to Mars and all that. He's not focused on that. But he does see it as a good thing, the work that Elon Musk is doing here. So he's playing this role kind of on the sidelines as a bit of a barker.
Right.
And I think that's going to continue.
David Gura, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful day. Thank you so much to our guests here, even David Gura, for really assisting, driving us forward to key inflation data tomorrow. For Gene Hackman, I'm not going to give away the ending. If you don't know the birdcage and Mr. Hackman's key part is Senator Kevin Keeley. Watch the birdcage. Good morning.